My son-in-law kicked the leg of my chair and gave me a choice. Either I put on an apron and serve him his espresso like the help, or I pack my bags and get out of his house. My daughter, the girl I raised with my own 2 hands, stood there and watched. She didn't defend me. She told me I was being difficult. She told me I should be grateful for the roof over my head. So I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply smiled, walked to my room, and grabbed the suitcase I had packed 3 days ago. They thought they were kicking out a broke retired mechanic who had nowhere to go. They had no idea they were evicting the landlord. 1 week later, my phone rang for the 30th time that hour. They had just found out that the credit cards, the cars, and the very house they lived in were all powered by my money. And I had just cut the power cord. Before I tell you how I brought their fake empire crumbling down, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to teach an ungrateful family member a lesson they would never forget. The morning sun was barely filtering through the blinds of the kitchen in Atlanta. I sat at the marble island, a cold, hard surface that felt more like a display case than a place to eat. In front of me was a bowl of plain oatmeal. It was simple. It was quiet. It was the only peace I got in this house. My name is Langston King. I am 72 years old. To my daughter and her husband, I am just an old man taking up space, a retired mechanic with grease under his fingernails and a meager pension that barely covers his medication. They see the calluses on my hands and assume I am broken. They do not know that those hands built King Enterprises. They do not know that those hands signed the deed to the commercial complex downtown just last week. They see a burden, I see a test, and this morning they were about to fail it. The peace shattered the moment Hunter walked in. He did not say good morning. He never did. He wore a silk robe that cost more than my first car, and he smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. He walked past me, stopped, and kicked the leg of my stool. It was not a stumble. It was a deliberate, sharp kick meant to rattle me. "Hey, Langston," he said, his voice heavy with sleep and disdain. The maid called in sick. Again. Probably lazy just like the rest of them. "I need a double espresso. And don't burn it this time." I slowly lowered my spoon into the oatmeal. I did not look at him. I looked at the steam rising from the bowl. For 3 years I had lived in this guest room. For 3 years I had paid their mortgage through a shell company, so they would never know it was me. For 3 years I had watched Hunter treat this house like a kingdom he had conquered, when in reality he was just a court jester living on my charity. "I am eating my breakfast, Hunter," I said calmly. My voice was low, a rumble from my chest. "The machine is right there. You have hands. Use them." The silence that followed was sharp. Hunter was not used to being told no. He was a creative director at a mid-sized ad agency, a title he wore like a crown. He was used to assistants running for his coffee. He was used to people nodding when he spoke. He was not used to an old black man in a flannel shirt telling him to do it himself. He stepped closer. He invaded my personal space looming over me. "Excuse me." He laughed a dry, humorless sound. "I think you are confused about how this works. You live here for free, Langston. You eat my food. You use my electricity. You take up space in my house. The least you can do, the absolute bare minimum, is make yourself useful. Now get up and make the coffee." I turned on the stool to face him. I looked him in the eye. I saw the red veins from the wine he drank last night. I saw the fear masked as aggression. He needed to feel big, so he tried to make me feel small. "No," I said. The reaction was instant. Hunter's face turned a violent shade of red. He swiped his hand across the island. His palm connected with my bowl of oatmeal. The ceramic bowl flew off the table and shattered against the floor. Hot, sticky oatmeal splattered across my pants and onto the pristine white tiles. The sound of the crash echoed through the large, empty house like a gunshot. "Look what you made me do," Hunter shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the mess. "Look at this mess. You are clumsy and you are useless. Clean it up right now." I did not move to clean it. I stood up slowly, brushing a glob of oatmeal from my knee. My heart was beating steady and slow. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I had given them every chance. I had waited for a spark of decency, a moment of gratitude. But there was nothing here but rot. "What is going on down here?" The voice came from the stairs. It was Nia, my daughter. She stood there in her pajamas, looking from the broken bowl to Hunter's red face and finally to me. I waited. I waited for her to ask if I was burned. I waited for her to tell her husband that he could not treat her father like a dog. I waited for the girl I had carried on my shoulders to show up. Instead, she sighed. It was a long, exasperated sigh that told me everything I needed to know. "Dad, seriously," she said, walking over to stand next to Hunter. "It is 7 in the morning. Why do you have to provoke him?" I looked at her stunned. "Provoke him, Nia." He threw my breakfast on the floor. "Hunter is under a lot of pressure." "Dad," she snapped, cutting me off, "he has a huge presentation today. He is the creative director. He carries the weight of this family on his back. He asked for a simple cup of coffee. Is that really too much to ask after everything we do for you?" "Everything you do for me," I repeated softly. "Yes," Hunter interjected, stepping forward, emboldened by her support. "We took you in, we gave you a room, and you sit there like a king contributing nothing." "Well, I am done. I am finished with this charity case." Hunter pointed at the back door. His finger was trembling with rage. "I am giving you an ultimatum, old man. Right here, right now. You either get down on your knees, clean up this mess, and learn how to serve this family with some respect, or you get out. You leave. Today." I looked at Nia. She did not look away. She did not flinch. She crossed her arms and stared at me with cold, hard eyes. "Maybe he is right, Dad," she said. Her voice was void of emotion. "Maybe this arrangement isn't working anymore. You are too set in your ways. You are stubborn. If you can't help out, if you can't support Hunter when he is stressed, then maybe you should find somewhere else to go." The air in the kitchen felt thin. I looked at the broken ceramic on the floor. I thought about the days I worked 3 shifts at the plant so Nia could have braces. I thought about the nights I slept in my truck so I could save money for her college tuition. I thought about Etta, my late wife, and how she made me promise to always look after our little girl. I had looked after her. I had bought this house through a trust so she would never have to worry about rent. I had secretly funded Hunter's car payments so she wouldn't have to stress about debt. I had been their safety net, invisible and strong. And now they were cutting the net. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who checks the final item off a very long list. "You are right," I said. My voice was calm, which seemed to infuriate Hunter even more. "This arrangement is not working." I stepped over the oatmeal. I did not look at the mess. I walked past Hunter, who was breathing heavily, waiting for a fight that I was not going to give him. I walked past Nia, who refused to meet my eyes now that the decision was made. "Where are you going?" Hunter barked. "I told you to clean this up." I ignored him. I walked down the hall to the guest room. I opened the closet. Sitting there right in the front was my old leather suitcase. It was already packed. I had packed it 3 days ago when Hunter made a joke at dinner about putting me in a home. I knew then that the end was near. I just needed them to pull the trigger. I grabbed the handle. It felt heavy and solid in my hand. I took one last look at the room. The bed was made. The surfaces were clean. I left nothing behind. No photos, no notes, nothing. I walked back out to the living room. They were still in the kitchen arguing about who would call the cleaning service. They didn't even hear me walk to the front door. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the morning air. It was crisp and cold. I walked down the driveway, the wheels of my suitcase clicking rhythmically against the pavement. I did not look back at the house. It was a beautiful house. I remembered signing the check for it. I remembered telling the lawyer to put it in a trust for Nia contingent on her good behavior and care for her father. I reached the end of the driveway and stopped. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I saw a text from Nia. "Don't come back until you're ready to apologize." I chuckled. I deleted the message. Then I dialed a number I had on speed dial. "Mr. Wallace," I said into the phone. "Yes, Mr. King," the lawyer answered instantly. "Initiate phase 1, I said. "Cut them off, cancel the cards, revoke the housing privileges, and send the car around. I am done playing the poor relation." I stood on the curb waiting. Behind me inside the house, I knew Hunter was probably pouring himself a drink, celebrating his victory. He thought he had won. He thought he had cleared out the trash. He had no idea that he had just evicted his only source of income. He had no idea that the man walking away with a battered suitcase was the only thing standing between him and total ruin. A sleek black Lincoln Town Car turned the corner and glided toward me. The driver, a man who had worked for me for 20 years, stepped out and opened the back door. "Good morning, Mr. King," he said. "Where to?" "The Ritz-Carlton," I said, sliding into the leather seat. "And then to the office. We have some adjustments to make." The car pulled away. I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. I felt a pang of sadness for the daughter I had lost, but it was quickly replaced by the cold clarity of justice. They wanted me to leave. They wanted independence. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. And God help them when they realized what that actually meant. The wheels of my old suitcase clicked against the pavement, a rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds of my departure. It was a sound of finality. I walked down the long, winding driveway of the estate, the morning sun beating down on the back of my neck. I could feel the eyes of the neighborhood on me. Mrs. Higgins was out walking her poodle 2 houses down. She stopped clutching the leash, her face twisting into a mask of pity. I knew what she was thinking. Poor old Langston. Kicked out again. Probably going to a shelter or a state home. She gave me a small, sad wave, the kind you give to a stray dog you have no intention of feeding. I nodded back, keeping my head low, my shoulders hunched. I played the part of the defeated, broken old man one last time. It was a role I had perfected over 3 years, a camouflage that allowed me to see who people really were when they thought I had nothing to offer. I did not want to break character just yet. The humiliation was part of the fuel I needed for what was to come. I felt a burning sensation on my back and stopped. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was, but I did anyway. I needed to see it. I needed to etch this image into my mind. Hunter was standing on the second-floor balcony of the master bedroom. He was leaning against the railing, holding a steaming mug of coffee, the coffee I had refused to make. He wasn't just watching me leave. He was enjoying it. He raised the mug and a mock toast, a smug, self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom, completely unaware that the castle was built on sand, and I was the tide that was about to wash it all away. Beside him, the curtains moved. Naya was there hiding in the shadows, watching her father walk away like unwanted trash. She didn't step out. She didn't call out. That silence hurt more than Hunter's mockery, but it also solidified my resolve. I turned back to the road and kept walking. The hill was steep and my knees ached, but inside my heart was beating with a cold, steady rhythm. I walked past the security gate, past the guard who barely glanced up from his phone, and turned the corner onto the main avenue where the large oak trees provided the cover I needed. The moment I stepped out of the line of sight of the house, the transformation began. The slump in my shoulders vanished. My spine straightened. The weary shuffle in my step was replaced by a confident, purposeful stride. I was no longer Langston the burden. I was Langston the architect. I checked my watch. 3:21. As if summoned by the thought, a sleek black Lincoln Town car turned the corner and glided toward me. It moved with the silent grace of a predator. The windows were tinted so dark they reflected the world back at itself, hiding the power within. The car pulled up to the curb and the rear door opened before the wheels had even fully stopped rolling. Thomas, my driver for 25 years, stepped out. He was an imposing man in an immaculately tailored suit, a stark contrast to my flannel shirt and worn jeans. He took the battered suitcase from my hand with the reverence of someone handling a briefcase full of gold bars. "Good morning, Chairman King," he said, his voice low and filled with professional respect. "Welcome back, sir." I slid into the back seat of the Lincoln. The heavy door closed with a solid thud, sealing out the heat, the noise, and the humiliation of the last hour. The air conditioning was set to my exact preference. The smell of premium leather filled my nose, replacing the scent of burnt oatmeal and ingratitude. I exhaled a long breath, letting the tension of the character I had been playing drain away. I pulled a bottle of water from the center console and took a sip. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a secure satellite phone. There was only one number I needed to call. I dialed Wallace. He picked up on the first ring, as I knew he would. "It is done," I said. My voice was no longer the soft, apologetic rumble of a grandfather walking on eggshells. It was the voice that had negotiated multi-million-dollar mergers. It was the voice of command. Mr. King, Wallace replied instantly. "Are you safe?" "I am in the car," I said. "Initiate phase 1. Cut the milk supply. I want every credit card, every auto payment, every hidden transfer linked to that house frozen immediately." I want to see how the creative director manages his empire when he has to pay for it with his own money. Understood, Sir Wallace said. His tone was sharp, efficient. The scorched earth protocol is in effect. We are severing the financial umbilical cord as we speak. I hung up the phone and leaned back into the leather seat. I watched the suburban streets roll by through the tinted glass. They looked peaceful, quiet. But I knew that in a few days a storm was going to break over that house on the hill. A storm entirely of my making. 20 minutes later, the car pulled up to the entrance of the Ritz-Carlton in the city center. I did not have to go to the front desk. The general manager was waiting at the curb, looking anxious. He opened my door personally. "Mr. King," he said, bowing slightly. "We were not expecting you, sir. Is everything all right? We have the presidential suite prepared, of course." "Everything is fine," I said, walking past him without breaking stride. "I just need a base of operations. And send up a bottle of the 1982 Bordeaux from my private cellar. I have a feeling I will be celebrating soon." I took the private elevator to the top floor. The suite was vast, silent, and luxurious. It was mine. In fact, the whole building was mine, held through a holding company that Hunter didn't even know existed. I walked to the mahogany desk overlooking the city skyline and opened my laptop. I logged into my secure financial dashboard. The screen flickered to life, displaying a complex web of accounts. It was the financial circulatory system of Hunter and Nia's life. It was a sea of red data points. The mortgage payments, the car leases for the Rover and the Porsche, the country club membership, the platinum credit cards. Every single aspect of their lavish lifestyle was linked to accounts funded by me. They thought they were living on Hunter's genius salary. They had no idea his salary barely covered the interest on his student loans. I stared at the screen. I saw the notifications popping up. Pending charge for a brunch reservation. Pending charge for a designer handbag. Pending auto draft for the electricity bill. I thought about Nia as a little girl holding my hand. I thought about Hunter screaming at me to clean up the mess he made. I thought about the ultimatum. With a single deliberate motion, I moved the cursor to the master control button labeled Terminate Links. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the button. The screen flashed. Authorization accepted. One by one, the green link icons turned gray and then disconnected. The flow of money stopped instantly. I leaned back in the chair and took a deep breath. I looked out at the city below. The sun was shining, but for Hunter and Nia, the long, cold winter had just begun. I was no longer their father or their father-in-law. I was the bank, and the bank was now closed. 1 week had passed since I walked out of the driveway with my life packed into a single suitcase. 7 days of silence. 7 days of watching the digital readouts on my laptop screen as Hunter and Nia continued to live their lives as if I had never existed. They burned through electricity. They ordered gourmet deliveries. They shopped online. They were celebrating their newfound freedom from the grumpy old man who ruined the aesthetic of their living room. But tonight was the night the bill would finally come due. Hunter had organized a dinner at the Gilded Fork, the most exclusive and ostentatiously expensive restaurant in Atlanta. He was meeting with Marcus Thorne, a potential investor he had been chasing for months. Hunter needed capital to save his floundering ad agency, although he would never admit it was floundering. To him, it was simply pre-expansion. I sat in the darkened living room of my hotel suite, the blue light of my laptop illuminating my face. I had access to the restaurant's reservation system through the hospitality group I owned. I saw the table they were seated at. Table 4, center of the room, to be seen. I saw the order ticket update in real time. Hunter had just ordered a bottle of Screaming Eagle Cabernet, $5,000. I took a sip of my own tea and waited. Hunter leaned back in the plush velvet chair, swirling the dark red wine in his crystal glass. He looked the part of the tycoon he pretended to be. He was wearing a bespoke suit that cost $3,000 a suit, paid for by a credit card that was silently linked to my investment dividends. Across from him sat Marcus Thorne, a man who actually possessed the wealth Hunter only pantomimed. Thorne looked unimpressed, checking his watch as Hunter launched into another monologue about his vision. "You have to understand," Marcus Hunter said, his voice loud enough to carry to the neighboring tables. "My agency isn't just about ads. It is about cultural architecture. We are building empires. I have personally financed the entire operation. No loans, no handouts, just pure grit and capital." Nia sat beside him, nodding enthusiastically. She wore a diamond necklace I had bought her for her 30th birthday, though she told her friends Hunter had bought it. She looked radiant, completely unaware that she was sitting on a trapdoor that had already been unlatched. We even trimmed the fat at home recently, Hunter continued laughing dismissively. We had some dead weight living in the guest room. My father-in-law. Nice guy, but zero ambition. Just a drain on resources. We finally had to let him go. You know how it is. You have to surround yourself with excellence to be excellent. Thorne raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He took a sip of the $5,000 wine. Hunter beamed, mistaking the silence for admiration. He signaled the waiter with a snap of his fingers, a gesture so arrogant it made my skin crawl even from miles away. "Check, please," Hunter announced, "and add a 20% tip. We take care of the people who serve us." The waiter, a young man in a crisp white uniform, placed the leather folio on the table. Hunter didn't even look at the bill. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the black card. It was a heavy piece of anodized titanium. He dropped it onto the tray with a distinct metallic clatter. It was a sound meant to announce his status. The waiter bowed and took the card. Hunter smiled at Thorne. "So Marcus, can I count you in for the first round of funding? I think $5 million is a good starting point." Thorne looked like he was considering it. Hunter's confidence was infectious, even if it was entirely fraudulent. The waiter returned. He did not have the receipt. He held the black titanium card between two fingers as if it were a contaminated object. He leaned down, whispering, but in the quiet hum of the fine dining room, the whisper carried like a scream. "I apologize, sir." The card was declined. Hunter laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "That is impossible," he said, loud enough for the table next to them to turn around. "That card has no limit. Run it again. You probably chipped the chip or something." "I ran it 3 times, sir," the waiter said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The issuer has placed a hard lock on the account. Code 001. Fraud protection or insufficient collateral." Hunter's face went from flush to pale in a second. He snatched the card back. "Here," he said, fumbling for his wallet. He pulled out a platinum Visa. "Try this one. It is my business account." The waiter took it and walked away. Naya reached out and touched Hunter's arm. "Hunter, what is going on?" she hissed. "Nothing, babe," Hunter snapped, sweat beading on his forehead. "Just a banking glitch. You know how these algorithms get when you make big purchases." The waiter returned faster this time. He didn't even lean in. "Declined, sir." The silence at the table was absolute. Marcus Thorne placed his napkin on the table. He didn't look angry. He looked bored. He looked like a man who had just realized he was having dinner with a child playing dress-up. Hunter, sweating profusely, now turned to Nia. "Give me your card," he demanded. "The joint account." Nia fumbled in her purse, her hands shaking. She pulled out her card and handed it to the waiter. The waiter walked to the terminal station a few feet away. Hunter watched him. Naya watched him. Thorne watched Hunter. I watched the screen on my laptop. The notification flashed. Attempted transaction 5 or $640. Status rejected. Source terminated. The waiter came back. He didn't say a word. He just shook his head and placed Naya's card on the table next to Hunter's useless titanium rectangle. "Is this a joke?" Hunter shouted, standing up. "Do you know who I am? I am going to sue this restaurant. I am going to buy this building and fire you." "Sit down," Marcus Thorne said. His voice was quiet, but it commanded immediate obedience. Hunter sat. Thorne pulled out a simple, worn leather wallet. He removed a card and handed it to the waiter. "I will cover the bill," Thorne said. "No, Marcus, please." Hunter stammered. "It is just a mix-up. I can transfer the money. I have the funds." Thorne stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked down at Hunter with a mixture of pity and disgust that was far worse than anger. Hunter Thorne said, cold and smooth, "You talked for 2 hours about independence and capital, yet you cannot pay for the wine you ordered. I do not do business with people who live in fantasies. Do not call my office again." Thorne walked out. He left Hunter and Nia sitting alone at the center table, surrounded by half-eaten food and a bottle of wine that cost more than they now had to their names. The waiter returned with Thorne's receipt. "You need to leave," the waiter said. "We have other guests waiting for this table. Guests who can pay." Hunter grabbed Nia's hand and dragged her out of the restaurant. They didn't wait for the valet. They ran to the parking lot where Hunter's Porsche was parked. They jumped inside the leather seats, no longer feeling like luxury, but like the interior of a cage. Hunter pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped it twice before he could dial. He put the bank on speakerphone. "Why are my cards declined?" Hunter screamed at the automated voice before a human even picked up. Finally, a representative answered. "Security verification, please," the operator said. Hunter gave his details. He screamed his social security number. "Sir," the operator said calmly, "these cards are supplementary cards issued under a master account held by a Mr. Langston King. The primary account holder has removed all collateral assets and terminated the authorized user privileges. The accounts are closed." Hunter froze. He looked at the phone as if it had turned into a snake. What he whispered. "That is a lie. I pay these bills." "The payments were auto-drafted from a trust account, sir," the operator clarified. "That trust has been revoked. You currently have a zero balance and an outstanding debt of $42,000 that was pending payment." The call ended. Hunter looked at Nia. Nia looked at Hunter. The truth hit them like a physical blow. The cars, the house, the clothes, the dinners. It wasn't Hunter's genius. It wasn't Nia's management. It was Langston. It had always been Langston. "Call him," Hunter screamed. "Call him right now." Nia dialed my number. I watched my phone on the desk. It lit up. Nia calling. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. She called again, and again. Hunter called, then Nia again. 30 missed calls in 10 minutes. I poured myself a glass of the 1982 Bordeaux. It tasted like oak and victory. I picked up the phone, looked at the screen one last time, and pressed the button on the side. Power off. The screen went black. I took a sip of wine. They were in the dark now, and they were just beginning to realize how cold it gets when the sun goes down. The headlights of Hunter's Porsche cut through the pitch-black darkness of the estate driveway like twin blades. He slammed on the brakes in front of the garage, the tires screeching against the pavement in a protest that matched his own fury. The garage door opener did not work. He pressed the button on his visor once, twice, 3 times. Nothing happened. The heavy door remained shut, a steel barrier between him and the sanctuary he thought he owned. He cursed, hitting the steering wheel with the palm of his hand. He had to get out and open the front door manually, fumbling with a key he hadn't used in 3 years because he was so accustomed to the electronic locks, recognizing his presence. Nia followed him, her heels clicking on the walkway, her face streaked with mascara tears. She was still shivering from the humiliation at the restaurant. They stepped into the foyer, and Hunter immediately slapped his hand against the wall switch for the grand chandelier. Click. Nothing happened. The house remained swallowed in an oppressive, heavy silence. There was no hum of the refrigerator, no soft glow from the security panel, no ambient noise from the climate control system. The air was already starting to feel stale and warm. Hunter marched into the kitchen, pulling his phone out to use the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating the mess of the morning that was still there. The dried oatmeal on the floor. The broken bowl. It was a monument to his own arrogance. He went to the sink and threw the lever for the faucet. A hollow groan echoed in the pipes, followed by a sputter of air. Not a single drop of water came out. "This is unbelievable," Hunter screamed, his voice cracking in the darkness. That useless old man. He forgot to pay the bills. That was the one thing he had to do. The one contribution he made to this household was handling the logistics. And he was so senile he let the power get cut. He paced the kitchen, the flashlight beam dancing wildly across the walls like a frantic insect. "I am going to kill him," Hunter shouted. "When I find him, I am going to drag him back here by his collar and make him fix this. He did this on purpose. He knew the bills were due and he just walked away." Nia sank onto one of the bar stools, burying her face in her hands. She wasn't angry. She was terrified. The reality of their situation was settling in on her faster than it was on Hunter. "Hunter," she sobbed, her voice muffled by her palms. "It is not just the bills. We have no money. The cards are declined. The bank accounts are frozen. He didn't just forget to pay the electric bill. He took everything." She looked up, her eyes wide and reflective in the harsh light of the phone. "He took his pension, Hunter. We have been living off that pension. We thought it was small, but he must have been saving it. He hoarded it. And now he has disappeared with the only cash flow we had." The accusation hung in the air. They truly believed that my mechanic's pension was what funded their lavish lifestyle. They were so deluded by their own greatness that they couldn't do the math. They couldn't see that a pension wouldn't cover the lease on the Porsche for a single month. But in their minds, I was a miser who had stolen their safety net. They ate dinner by the light of 3 scented candles Nia found in the guest bathroom. It wasn't a romantic candlelight dinner. It was a meal of desperation. The electric stove was dead. The microwave was a brick. They ate cold cuts and cheese directly from the package, tearing at the food with their fingers because they couldn't find clean silverware in the dark. The shadows flickered against the walls, distorting their faces, making them look like the monsters they were becoming. "This is temporary," Hunter said, chewing on a piece of salami with aggressive force. "We just need to find him. We need to find where he is hiding. He can't have gone far. He is a creature of habit." Naya wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. She looked at her husband, the man she had chosen over me, and for the first time, I think she saw his helplessness. "I know where he might be," Nia whispered. Hunter stopped chewing. "Where?" "There is an address," she said. "It comes on his bank statements. I saw it once when I was going through his mail. It is an old apartment complex on the south side, the rough part of town. He probably kept a place there. A bolt hole." Hunter stood up, knocking his chair over in the dark. "Let's go," he commanded. "We are going to get our money back." They piled back into the Porsche. The fuel light was on another blinking red eye of judgment, but they had enough to get across town. Naya navigated her phone battery dying, guiding them away from the manicured lawns of the north side and into the gritty industrial heart of the south side. The streets became narrower. The streetlights were broken. The houses had bars on the windows. Hunter locked the car doors, his eyes darting nervously at the shadows. They pulled up to a brick building that looked like it had stood for 100 years. It was worn but sturdy. It was the kind of place where people worked hard and kept their heads down. "That is it," Nia said, pointing to the number 4B on the mailbox. "That is the address on the statements." Hunter parked the car illegally in front of a fire hydrant. He didn't care. He stormed up the steps, Nia trailing behind him. He pounded on the front door of the complex. There was no buzzer, just a heavy steel door. "Open up, Langston," he shouted. "I know you are in there." A window on the first floor slid open. A large woman with a head wrap looked out. She didn't look scared, she looked annoyed. "Who is making all that racket?" she demanded. "We are looking for Langston King," Hunter barked. "He lives here. Tell him his daughter is here and she wants to talk." The woman squinted at them. She looked at Hunter's suit, which was now wrinkled and stained with sweat. She looked at Nia's tear-streaked face. Then she laughed. It was a deep, belly-shaking laugh. "Langston King?" she asked. "You mean Mr. King?" "Yes, Mr. King," Hunter snapped. "The old man. Where is his apartment? Is it 4B? The woman shook her head, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye. "Honey, Mr. King does not live in 4B. Mr. King owns this building. He owns this whole block. He hasn't lived in an apartment since the 80s. Nia froze. She looked at the building. It was old, yes, but it was large. 12 units, and the woman said he owned the block. "What do you mean he owns it?" Nia stammered. "He is a mechanic." The woman leaned on the windowsill, looking at them with pity. "He was a mechanic, baby. Now he is the landlord, and he definitely isn't here. He only comes around to inspect the properties once a month. You two are looking for a ghost." She slammed the window shut. Hunter stood there on the stoop, staring at the closed window. His brain was trying to reject the information. It didn't fit his narrative. Langston couldn't be a property mogul. Langston was the guy who fixed toasters. Langston was the guy who needed a place to stay. "He is lying," Hunter said, turning back to Nia. His voice was shaking. "He paid her to say that. Or maybe he works here as the super. That makes sense. He is the janitor. He cleans the toilets and fixes the pipes. That is why they call him the landlord. It is a nickname." Nia looked at the building, then at Hunter. Doubt was creeping into her eyes, but she pushed it down. She had to push it down, because if her father was actually the owner, then she had made a mistake so catastrophic it was impossible to comprehend. "You are right," Nia said, her voice weak. "He is just the maintenance guy. Come on, let's go home. It is cold." They walked back to the car in silence. The wind whipped down the street, carrying trash along the sidewalk. They got into the Porsche, the leather seats cold and uninviting. Hunter turned the key. The engine roared to life, burning the last dregs of fuel. They drove back to the dark, silent mansion on the hill, unaware that the darkness they were returning to was permanent. I watched them go from the security feed on my laptop in the hotel suite. I took a sip of tea. They were chasing phantoms in the dark, refusing to see the light even when it was shining right in their faces. They still thought I was the help. They still thought they were the masters. But tomorrow, the eviction notice would arrive, and then they would have to face the daylight. The morning light filtered through the windows of the silent mansion, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air. Without the hum of the air conditioning or the refrigerator, the house felt like a tomb. Hunter sat at the kitchen island, his eyes fixed on his phone screen. It vibrated against the marble countertop with a harsh buzzing sound. Restricted number. He knew exactly who it was. It was the financing company for the Porsche. He had missed 3 payments. The grace period was over. They were calling to arrange repossession. He declined the call, his finger stabbing the red button with unnecessary force. His hands were shaking. He looked up as Naya walked into the kitchen. She was wrapped in a cashmere blanket, shivering despite the mild Atlanta morning. Her eyes were swollen from crying. The makeup she hadn't washed off from the night before was smeared across her cheeks. Hunter looked at her and saw his own fear reflected back. They were drowning. "We need money," Nia Hunter said. His voice was raspy from dehydration and stress. "We need cash flow immediately. They are going to take the car. They are going to foreclose on the house. I can't lose the car, Nia. It is my image. It is my business." Naya sat down on the stool next to him. She looked small, defeated. "What can we do, Hunter?" she whispered. "We have nothing. The accounts are frozen. The cards are dead." Hunter's eyes narrowed. His mind raced, seeking a lifeline, a victim. He thought about me. He thought about the pension he believed I had been hoarding for years. He thought about the fact that I had no mortgage, no car payments, no debts. In his mind, I was sitting on a pile of cash that belonged to him by right of inheritance. "We find your father," Hunter said, the plan forming rapidly in his desperate mind. "We find him, and we take control." Naya frowned. "Control?" "He left, Hunter. He is gone." "He is old," Nia Hunter snapped. "He is confused. He forgot to pay the electric bill. He forgot to pay the water. That is proof of cognitive decline. That is negligence. We use that. We find him and we get him committed. We put him in a facility. A state-run home, somewhere cheap." Nia's eyes widened. "You want to put my father in a home? I want to save us," Hunter hissed. "If he is declared incompetent, we get guardianship. We get power of attorney. We get access to his accounts to manage his affairs. That pension check comes to us. His savings come to us. It is the only way, Nia. Do you want to be homeless? Do you want to be on the street? Or do you want to take care of your family?" Nia hesitated. I saw the conflict in her face, the flicker of conscience. But then she looked around the dark kitchen. She thought about her social standing. She thought about her comfort. The conscience flickered and died. "Do it," she said. Hunter didn't waste a second. He didn't have time for legal channels or legitimate evaluations. He needed a result today. He scrolled through his contacts until he found a number he hadn't used in years. Dr. Vane. He was a man who had lost his hospital privileges years ago due to ethical violations, but kept a private practice that catered to the desperate and the shady. He was a man who sold signatures. Hunter drove the Porsche to a strip mall on the outskirts of the city, praying he had enough gas to make the return trip. Dr. Vane's office was in the back behind a dry cleaner. The waiting room smelled of stale smoke and despair. Hunter marched past the receptionist and into the office. Vane was sitting behind a cluttered desk, looking greasy and tired. "I need a 1013 form," Hunter said, slapping a thick envelope onto the desk. It contained $5,000 in cash. It was the last of the money he had borrowed from a loan shark, money he was supposed to use to pay the interest on his gambling debts. He was betting his life on this move. Vane opened the envelope. He counted the bills with practiced speed. He didn't ask for medical records. He didn't ask for patient history. "Who is the subject?" Vane asked, pulling a form from his drawer. Langston King Hunter replied. "He is 72, African American. He is suffering from acute paranoid schizophrenia and early onset dementia. He is violent. He attacked me last week. He hallucinates. He thinks he is a wealthy businessman. He thinks he owns buildings downtown. He is a danger to himself and others." Vane wrote it all down. He didn't blink. He checked the boxes for immediate involuntary commitment. He stamped the document with his medical license number. "This gives you emergency custody for 72 hours, Vane said, handing the paper to Hunter. "You call the police or a private transport service, show them this, and they will pick him up. Once he is in the system, the courts usually rubber stamp the guardianship." Hunter took the paper. His hands stopped shaking. He smiled. It was a cruel, predatory smile. He held my freedom in his hands. He held the key to my vault, or so he thought. He walked out of that office feeling like a winner. He had just sold his soul for $5,000 and he thought he got a bargain. At that exact moment, 10 miles away in the gleaming glass tower of Atlanta General Hospital, I was sitting in a very different kind of office. The room was bright, sterile, and commanded a view of the entire city. Across from me sat Dr. Sterling, the chief of neurology. He was a man of unimpeachable reputation. We had spent the last 4 hours conducting the most rigorous psychological and cognitive evaluation modern medicine could offer. I had undergone MRI scans to rule out organic brain disease. I had completed batteries of memory tests, logic puzzles, and personality assessments. I had sat for a 90-minute interview with a panel of 3 psychiatrists. Dr. Sterling closed the thick file on his desk. He took off his reading glasses and looked at me with a mixture of professional admiration and personal respect. "Mr. King," he said. The results are unequivocal. Your cognitive function is in the 99th percentile for your age group. In fact, your processing speed and recall are superior to many men half your age. There is absolutely no evidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other degenerative condition. You are as sharp as a tack. I nodded, adjusting the cuff of my suit jacket. "I need that in writing, doctor," I said. My voice was steady. "I need a notarized affidavit stating that I am of sound mind, fully capable of managing my own financial and personal affairs, and that any claims to the contrary are medically unfounded." Dr. Sterling pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Send the notary in, please," he said. 5 minutes later, I walked out of the hospital. I held a document in my hand that was more powerful than any weapon. It was an ironclad shield against the arrows Hunter was sharpening. I folded the affidavit and placed it into the inside pocket of my jacket right next to the small faded photograph of Etta. I walked to the waiting town car. Thomas opened the door. "Where to, sir?" he asked. "Back to the hotel." "Thomas," I said, "I have a feeling I am going to have visitors soon, and I want to be ready to receive them." I sat back as the car merged into traffic. I closed my eyes. I felt a profound sadness for what was coming. Hunter and Naya had crossed a line from selfishness into criminality. They were not just ungrateful children anymore. They were enemies. And I treat my enemies very differently than I treat my family. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The private investigator called Hunter at noon. He had located me. I was not in a homeless shelter. I was not in a state-run facility. I was at the Ritz-Carlton. Hunter put the phone on speaker so Nia could hear. He laughed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated malice. He told Nia that the old man was burning through his life savings in a final act of senile rebellion. He said I was trying to live like a king before I died a pauper. They rushed to the car. They did not bother to change. They couldn't have, even if they wanted to. The water had been off for 2 days. Their clothes were wrinkled and stained with sweat. Hunter smelled of stale cologne and desperation. Nia looked haggard, her hair pulled back in a messy bun to hide the grease. They looked like exactly what they were, people who were falling apart. They stormed into the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton like a hurricane of entitlement. The marble floors gleamed under the crystal chandeliers. The air smelled of fresh lilies and old money. Hunter marched up to the front desk, slamming his hand on the counter. He demanded to know which room Langston King was staying in. The concierge, a man named Pierre who had known me for a decade, looked at Hunter with a mixture of confusion and distaste. He politely informed Hunter that he could not disclose guest information. Hunter exploded. He screamed that he was my legal guardian. He shouted that I was a mentally unstable old man who had stolen money from his family. He caused a scene that made the well-heeled guests in the lobby stop and stare. Security started to move in. It was the perfect stage for my entrance. I stepped out of the private elevator. I was not wearing my grease-stained coveralls. I was not wearing the flannel shirt Hunter detested. I was wearing a charcoal gray Armani suit that had been tailored to my frame in Milan. My shoes were hand-stitched Italian leather that shone under the lobby lights. On my wrist was a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than the mortgage Hunter could no longer pay. I held a cup of Earl Grey tea in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. I looked at the commotion near the desk. I saw my daughter and her husband looking like refugees from a disaster they had created. Hunter saw me first. His jaw literally dropped. He blinked, trying to reconcile the image of the father-in-law he treated like a servant with the man standing before him. He looked at the suit. He looked at the shoes. He looked at the way the staff bowed their heads slightly as I passed. But his arrogance was a powerful drug. He shook his head, convincing himself that this was just a costume. "Well, look at you," Hunter sneered, his voice echoing in the quiet lobby. "You really went all out, didn't you, Langston? How much did it cost to rent the suit? Did you spend the last of your pension on a costume party? You look ridiculous." Nia stepped forward. She reached out a hand, but she didn't touch me. She looked at the fabric of my jacket. She knew quality. She knew this wasn't a rental, but she was too terrified to admit what that meant. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling, "please stop this. You are making a scene. Just come home." Hunter stepped between us. He puffed out his chest, trying to intimidate me. "We are here to save you from yourself," old man Hunter said. "We know you are not well. We know you are confused. But we are generous people. We are willing to forgive you for running away. We are willing to forgive you for stealing our money. Just give us the rest of the cash check out of this fantasy hotel and come home. We have a nice room waiting for you. It has locks on the doors for your own safety." I took a sip of my tea. It was perfectly brewed. I looked at Hunter. I looked at the sweat stains on his collar. I looked at the fear behind his eyes. "I am not going anywhere, Hunter," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and resonant. "I am exactly where I belong. And as for your forgiveness, you can keep it. You're going to need it for yourself." Hunter laughed. It was a forced, ugly sound. "Don't be stupid, Langston. You have nowhere else to go. That house is the only roof you have." I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a sheep that had wandered into the den. "That house," I said softly. "You seem to be under the impression that it is your house." I raised my hand. From the shadows of the lounge, Mr. Wallace stepped forward. He was holding a thick manila envelope. He walked up to Hunter and thrust the envelope into his chest. Hunter instinctively grabbed it. "What is this?" Hunter asked. "It is an eviction notice," Wallace said. His voice was dry and professional. "Eviction," Hunter sputtered. "You can't evict me. I own that house. Nia owns that house. Read the deed, Hunter," I said. "You never saw the original deed, did you? You just saw the trust documents I let you see." Hunter tore open the envelope. He pulled out the document. His eyes scanned the page frantically. "The property located at 450 Highland Avenue is held in the Etta and Langston King Revocable Trust," Wallace recited from memory. "The occupants, Nia and Hunter Vance, are granted tenancy solely at the discretion of the trustee, Mr. Langston King. This tenancy is subject to the filial piety clause, which mandates that the occupants treat the trustee with respect and care." Wallace paused. He looked at Hunter over the rim of his glasses. "Clause violated," Wallace said. "Tenancy revoked." Hunter looked up from the paper. His face was ashen. "This is fake," he whispered. "This is a forgery." "It is filed with the county clerk," I said. "You have 3 days to vacate the premises. If you are not out by Friday at noon, the sheriff will remove you. And Hunter, I suggest you don't try to take anything that doesn't belong to you. The inventory list is very thorough." Nia started to cry. "Dad, you can't do this. We have nowhere to go. We have no money." I looked at my daughter. I saw the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. But I also saw the woman who stood by and watched her husband throw my breakfast on the floor. "You have 3 days, Nia," I said. "You are young, you are smart. Figure it out." I turned my back on them. I walked toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard Hunter screaming threats. I heard him crumbling. I pressed the button for the penthouse. The doors closed, shutting out their noise. I was alone again, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt clean. My daughter stood on the sidewalk outside the hotel. The heavy glass doors had closed, sealing me inside my world of air-conditioned luxury and leaving her out in the humid Atlanta heat. In her hands, she held the eviction notice Wallace had handed to Hunter. It was a thick document heavy with legal authority and the weight of her own failures. She stared at the black ink as if the words were written in a language she refused to understand. Her hands began to tremble. Then a scream tore from her throat. It was a raw, primal sound of absolute denial. She grabbed the top of the envelope and ripped it. She tore the paper once, twice, 3 times, shredding the legal warnings into jagged confetti that scattered across the concrete. "He is crazy," she screamed, her voice cracking. "He has lost his mind. That house is mine. He said it was mine. He stood in the kitchen 10 years ago and told me it was my home forever. He can't take it back. He can't just throw us out because of a bad mood." Hunter grabbed her shoulders. He shook her, trying to snap her out of the hysteria, but his own eyes were wide with panic. He needed her to be angry, not broken. Anger was useful. Despair was not. "Listen to me," Nia, Hunter hissed, bringing his face close to hers. "Your father is senile. Did you see him in there? Did you see that suit? He is playing dress-up. He is burning through his savings to rent a fantasy life. That lawyer is a shark who smells blood in the water. He is manipulating a confused old man to get his hands on the pension." Nia looked at him, her eyes searching for a lifeline. "Do you really think so?" she whispered. "I know so." Hunter lied. He lied with the ease of a man who had been doing it his whole life. "We are going to fight this. We are going to sue him for elder abuse. We are going to prove he is incompetent and that the house was a verbal gift. The law protects us, Nia. Possession is 9/10 of the law. We have lived there for 3 years. It is our home." They got back into the Porsche. The drive back to the estate was silent and tense. Hunter drove with a reckless aggression, cutting off other cars running red lights. He was a man cornered, and he was ready to bite. When they arrived at the house, it was sweltering inside. The lack of air conditioning had turned the mansion into an oven, but Hunter didn't care about the heat. He cared about paper. He stormed into the home office, a room he had claimed for his creative genius but mostly used to play video games. He went straight to the filing cabinet in the corner. He yanked the drawers open, pulling out hanging folders and dumping them onto the floor. Tax returns, utility bills, warranties for appliances they couldn't afford to fix. He threw paper into the air, searching frantically for one specific document. "Where is it?" he shouted, kicking a pile of receipts. "Where is the deed?" Nia stood in the doorway, watching him destroy the room. "I never saw a deed, Hunter," she said quietly. "Dad always said the lawyers handled the paperwork. He just gave us the keys." Hunter stopped. He looked at her. The realization hit him hard. There was no deed. There was no transfer of title. There was no paper trail that linked their names to the property. I had never signed it over. I had let them play house in a property I owned completely. "He tricked us," Hunter spat. "The old snake never gave it to you. He kept it in his name the whole time." He pulled out his phone. He scrolled past the debt collectors and the angry clients until he found a number saved as the Fixer. It was a lawyer named Saul, a man who operated out of a strip mall and specialized in gray areas. "Saul, it is Hunter," he said into the phone, his voice low and urgent. "I have a situation. I need an affidavit. I need a witness statement proving a verbal contract for a property transfer. Yes, a gift. I need it backdated 3 years. I don't care how much it costs. I will pay you when we sell the house. Just draw it up." He hung up and looked at Nia. "We are going to take what is ours," he said. "If he won't give it to us, we will take it." Night fell over the estate. The darkness inside the house was absolute. Hunter sat in the living room staring at the heavy oak door at the end of the hallway. It was the door to my private study. For 3 years that room had been locked. I had told them it was where I kept my old tools and dusty files. I had told them it was dangerous, full of rusty metal and sharp edges. I had forbidden them from entering. Hunter stood up. He walked to the garage and came back with a cordless drill and a heavy crowbar. The battery on the drill was dying, but he hoped it had enough juice for one lock. "He thinks he is smart," Hunter muttered to himself. "He thinks he can starve us out. But I know his secret." He turned to Nia, who was sitting on the couch hugging her knees. "The pension," Nia, Hunter said, pointing the drill at the study door. "He didn't take it all with him. He couldn't have. Old people don't trust banks. He hoarded cash. I bet you anything that room is full of cash. That is why he keeps it locked. That is why he wouldn't let us in. He has been sitting on a gold mine while we struggled." Nia didn't stop him. She was too tired, too hungry, too broken to argue. She watched as her husband walked down the hallway to break into her father's sanctuary. I sat in the penthouse suite of the Ritz-Carlton. The city lights twinkled below me like a sea of diamonds. I opened my laptop and pulled up the security feed. I had installed hidden cameras in every room of the house, including the hallway outside my study. The image was crisp and clear in night vision green. I saw Hunter approach the door. I saw the sweat on his forehead. I saw the greed in his eyes. He raised the drill to the lock. The sound of the metal bit grinding against the brass mechanism came through the speakers of my laptop. It was a harsh, violent noise. I took a sip of wine. "Go ahead, Hunter," I whispered to the screen. "Drill it. Break it." The lock gave way with a snap. Hunter kicked the door open. He rushed inside the crowbar raised ready to smash open boxes of money. I watched him disappear into the room. He had just crossed the final line. Breaking and entering, destruction of property. He thought he was breaking into a treasure chest. He had no idea he was walking into a crime scene of his own making. He took the bait, I said aloud. I picked up my phone and dialed Wallace. He is in the study, I said. Add burglary to the list of charges. And Wallace. Make sure the sheriff knows exactly what time he entered. I want the timeline to be perfect. I watched the screen. Hunter was tearing the room apart. He was looking for salvation. He was going to find nothing but his own doom. The sound of the drill bit grinding against the hardened steel of the safe echoed through the speakers of my laptop like a dentist's drill hitting a nerve. It was a high-pitched screaming whine that filled the silence of my hotel suite. On the screen, the night vision camera captured every bead of sweat rolling down Hunter's forehead. He was on his knees in my study, a place he had been forbidden to enter for 3 years, destroying the last remnants of his dignity. He pushed his entire body weight against the drill, his face contorted in a rictus of greed and exertion. He was cursing a steady stream of profanity that would have made a sailor blush, directing his rage at the metal at the lock and at me. "Come on, you piece of junk," Hunter screamed, the veins in his neck bulging. "Open up! Give me the money!" Nia stood by the door, her arms wrapped around herself, looking like a ghost haunting her own home. She kept glancing down the hallway, terrified that the police or a neighbor would hear the noise. But she didn't stop him. She didn't tell him to put the drill down. She watched complicit in her silence, hoping just as much as he did that the safe would spit out the salvation they hadn't earned. "Hunter, stop," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the mechanical screech. "This is crazy. What if there is an alarm?" "There is no alarm," Hunter shouted back, not taking his eyes off the drill. "The old man is too cheap for alarms. He keeps his money in cash. I know it. He doesn't trust banks. He is sitting on a fortune, Nia, and I am going to get it." The drill bit snapped with a loud crack. Hunter swore violently and threw the broken piece across the room. He grabbed the crowbar he had brought from the garage. He jammed the flat end into the gap he had created and hauled back with all his strength. The metal groaned. The hinges shrieked in protest. Hunter's face turned purple. He grunted, heaved, and finally, with a sound like a gunshot, the heavy door of the safe popped open. Hunter dropped the crowbar. He scrambled forward on his hands and knees, panting like a dog. He reached into the dark cavity of the safe, his fingers clawing at the shadows, expecting to feel the crisp texture of stacked $100 bills. He expected bundles of cash. He expected gold coins. He expected the pension he had convinced himself I was hoarding. He pulled his hand out. It was empty. He reached in again, frantically sweeping his arm back and forth. He pulled out a few envelopes. He ripped them open. They were empty. He pulled out a small metal box. He shook it. It rattled. He pried the lid off. It was full of old buttons and spare keys. No, Hunter whispered. No, no, no. Where is it? Where is the money? He stood up and kicked the safe door. He grabbed the metal box of buttons and threw it against the wall. Buttons rained down on the floor like plastic hail. He lied, Hunter screamed, turning to Nia. He lied to us. He is broke. He is destitute. There is nothing here, just trash. He really is just a useless old mechanic. I watched from my suite, swirling the wine in my glass. The disappointment on his face was sweeter than the vintage. He had broken into my sanctuary, violated my privacy, and destroyed my property, only to find that the treasure he sought existed only in his own greedy imagination. But he wasn't done. He hadn't found the real trap yet. Hunter fell back to his knees, exhausted and defeated. He began to sift through the debris he had pulled from the safe, looking for anything of value, anything he could pawn or sell. He picked up a black and white photograph that had slid out from between the envelopes. He held it up to the light of his phone flashlight. It was a picture taken 40 years ago. It showed a young man with grease on his hands and a determined look in his eyes, standing next to a beautiful woman in a simple Sunday dress. They were standing in front of a construction site, a massive steel skeleton rising into the Atlanta sky. The woman was Etta. The man was me. And the building behind us was the King Tower, the skyscraper that would eventually become the crown jewel of the city's skyline. "Who cares about this sentimental garbage?" Hunter muttered, tossing the photo onto the floor. "Just the old man and your mom standing in front of some construction site, probably where he worked as a laborer." He didn't look closely. He didn't see the sign in the background of the photo that read "Future Site of King Enterprises HQ." He didn't connect the dots. His arrogance blinded him to the history staring him right in the face. He assumed I was the worker, never the architect. He picked up a small, cream-colored card that had been tucked behind the photo. He squinted at it. Wallace and Associates Hunter read aloud. Legal counsel for King Enterprises. He frowned. He knew the name Wallace. It was the man who had handed him the eviction notice. But the second part confused him. King Enterprises, Hunter said, turning the card over. Why would the old man have the business card for the biggest real estate developer in the state? He looked at Naya. Maybe he tried to get a job there, Naya suggested weakly. Or maybe he tried to sue them for something. You know how he is. Hunter scoffed and flicked the card away. It landed face up on the carpet, the gold-embossed letters shimmering in the flashlight beam. Yeah, probably a slip and fall, Hunter said. Trying to scam a corporation. That sounds like him. Always looking for a handout. He went back to the safe, reaching into the very back, the deepest shadow. His hand brushed against leather. He pulled out a small bound book. It was an old diary. The leather was cracked and worn. It looked worthless. Hunter was about to throw it away when a piece of paper fell out from the back pages. He picked up the paper. It was a map. A hand-drawn map of the south side of the city. There was a red circle around a large plot of land near the industrial district. Next to the map was a note written in my handwriting. Secret investment. Lot number 9. South sector. Do not sell. Future value projected at $5 million. Hunter froze. His eyes widened. He read the note again. Then he opened the diary to the last page. There was another entry dated 2 years ago. The land is sitting there. No one knows I own it. Just waiting for the right buyer. If times get hard, this is the safety net. The deed is in the filing cabinet under miscellaneous. Hunter looked up at Naya. The despair in his face vanished, replaced instantly by a manic, feverish hope. Naya, look at this, he whispered, his voice trembling with excitement. He shoved the diary into her hands. Landhunter said, he owns land. He calls it a secret investment. He says it is worth $5 million. Nia looked at the map. But this is in the industrial district, she said. It is just wasteland. It was wasteland 20 years ago, Hunter said, his mind racing. Now it is prime logistics territory. Amazon, FedEx. They are all buying up land down there. The old man probably bought it for pennies back in the day and forgot about it. He is so senile he doesn't even realize he is sitting on a lottery ticket. He scrambled up and ran back to the filing cabinet he had destroyed earlier. He started digging through the pile of papers on the floor labeled miscellaneous. He threw aside recipes and instruction manuals until he found it, a thick official-looking document. It wasn't the original deed, it was a copy I had planted there. A very convincing copy of a property title for lot number 9. I found it, Hunter shouted, holding the paper up like a trophy. I found the golden goose. He hugged Nia, spinning her around in the dark, hot room. We are saved, baby, he said. We are going to sell this land. We are going to sell it tomorrow. We will get a quick sale. Even if we get half of what it is worth, we are rich. We can pay off the debts. We can keep the house. We can buy a new Porsche. But how can we sell it? Nia asked, pulling back. It is in his name. Hunter tapped the side of his head. We have a lawyer, remember Saul, the fixer. If we bring him the deed, he can draft a power of attorney. We tell him Langston is incapacitated. We tell him it is an emergency sale to pay for his medical care. Saul won't ask questions as long as he gets his cut. He kissed the paper. The old man finally came through, Hunter said. He was hiding this from us. He was going to let us starve while he sat on a gold mine. Well, finders keepers. I watched them on the screen. I watched them celebrate their theft. I watched them plot to sell property that wasn't theirs. I took another sip of wine. Hunter thought he had found a lifeline. He didn't know he had just wrapped the noose around his own neck. Lot number 9 wasn't empty land, and selling it wasn't going to make him rich. It was going to make him a felon. Go ahead, Hunter, I whispered to the empty room. Sell it. See what happens when you try to sell the headquarters of the company that owns this city. I closed the laptop. The trap was sprung. Tomorrow the jaws would snap shut, and I would be there to watch the blood hit the water. Hunter scraped together the last remnants of his dignity and his cash reserves. He pawned his Rolex. It was the watch he bought to celebrate his promotion to creative director, a promotion he never actually received, but lied about to impress his friends. He took the $3,000 from the pawn shop and drove straight to the back room of a laundromat where Saul, the lawyer who had lost his license a decade ago, operated his practice. Hunter needed a power of attorney document. He needed a piece of paper that said Langston King was mentally incapacitated and that his beloved son-in-law had the full legal right to liquidate his assets for medical expenses. Saul did not ask questions. He just counted the cash with yellowed fingertips and typed up the document on a typewriter that sounded like a machine gun. He forged my signature with a frightening level of skill. He stamped it with a notary seal that had expired 5 years ago. Hunter grabbed the paper as if it were a winning lottery ticket. He didn't care about the legality. He didn't care about the morality. He only cared about the sale. He drove to the industrial district on the edge of the city. This was not the world of glass skyscrapers and polished boardrooms. This was the world of concrete steel and deals made in the shadows. He parked in front of a nondescript office building with blacked-out windows. The sign above the door simply said Real Estate Solutions. It was the office of Mick the Hammer Russo, a broker known for buying distressed properties for cash, no questions asked. Hunter walked in with his chest puffed out. He held the folder containing the copy of the deed and the forged power of attorney. He sat across from Mick, a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. Hunter slammed the folder onto the desk. "I have a prime piece of real estate," Hunter announced. "Lot number 9, South Sector. My father-in-law has been sitting on it for 40 years. He is sick. We need cash today. I am willing to let it go for half its value." Mick opened the folder. He looked at the deed. He looked at the forged power of attorney. He lit a cigar and blew the smoke into Hunter's face. He didn't seem impressed. He opened his laptop and typed in the lot number. Hunter tapped his foot impatiently. He was already spending the money in his head. He would pay off the loan shark. He would get the Porsche out of hiding. He would buy a generator for the house until he could bully the power company into turning the lights back on. He smiled at Mick, waiting for the offer, waiting for the briefcase full of cash. Mick stopped typing, his eyes fixed on the screen. His face, which had been bored a moment ago, suddenly drained of all color. He looked at the screen again. Then he looked at the deed. Then he looked at Hunter. The cigar fell from his mouth and landed on the desk, burning a hole in a stack of papers. Mick didn't even notice. He stood up slowly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Who are you?" Mick whispered. His voice was tight with fear. "Who sent you here? Is this a setup? Are you wearing a wire?" Hunter frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I am Hunter Vance. That is my father-in-law's land. I just want to sell it. What is the problem? Is it zoned for industrial?" Mick grabbed the folder and threw it at Hunter. The papers scattered across the room. Mick reached under his desk and pulled out a baseball bat. "Get out!" Mick screamed. "Get out of my office before I kill you!" Hunter scrambled back his chair, toppling over. "You are crazy. What is wrong with you? It is just a plot of land. It is just dirt." Mick walked around the desk, swinging the bat. "Dirt!" Mick roared. "You idiot! You moron! That is not dirt. Do you know what lot number 9 is?" Hunter shook his head, terrified. "No." The map said it was wasteland. Mick grabbed Hunter by the lapels of his ruined suit and dragged him to the computer screen. He shoved Hunter's face toward the monitor. "Look," Mick shouted. "Look at the satellite image." Hunter looked. The map he had found in my diary was 40 years old. The satellite image on the screen was from yesterday. Lot number 9 was not empty. It was covered by a massive, sprawling structure that spanned 50 acres. It was a complex of sleek, gray warehouses, docking bays for hundreds of trucks, and a glass office tower that gleamed in the sun. The logo on the roof of the main building was visible even from space. It was the signature arrow of Amazon. That is the regional distribution hub for the entire Southeast. Mick yelled, shaking Hunter. "It is the busiest logistics center in the state. It generates $1 billion a year in revenue, and you walk in here with a fake piece of paper trying to sell it to me for cash. Do you know who owns that building? Do you know who leases that land to Amazon?" Hunter stammered. "My father-in-law, Langston King." Mick threw Hunter toward the door. "Yes, Langston King." Mick spat. "King Enterprises, the biggest developer in Atlanta, the man who owns half the skyline. You are trying to sell the crown jewel of the King Empire with a notary stamp from a disbarred lawyer. If King finds out I even talked to you, he will crush me. He will bury me under one of his parking lots. Get out." Mick swung the bat, smashing it into the door frame inches from Hunter's head. Hunter didn't wait. He scrambled out the door, falling onto the sidewalk. Mick threw the folder out after him. "Don't come back," Mick shouted. "And tell your father-in-law I had nothing to do with this." Hunter lay on the concrete, gasping for air. Passers-by stepped around him, looking at him with disgust. He gathered the papers with shaking hands. He looked at the copy of the deed. Lot number 9. He looked at the forged signature of Langston King. His mind was reeling. It was impossible. It had to be a mistake. The mechanic, the man who fixed toasters, the man who ate oatmeal in the corner of the kitchen. How could he own the Amazon distribution center? How could he be King Enterprises? Hunter stood up, using a lamppost for support. He looked down the street. In the distance, he could see the skyline of Atlanta. He saw the crane-filled construction sites. He saw the gleaming towers. He remembered the business card he had found in the safe. Wallace and Associates, legal counsel for King Enterprises. He remembered the suit I wore at the Ritz-Carlton. It wasn't a costume. It fit too well. He remembered the black town car. He remembered the way the hotel staff bowed to me. King Enterprises, Hunter whispered. Langston King. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the gut. The names were the same. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a common name. His father-in-law, the man he had treated like a servant, the man he had evicted, was the invisible king of the city. No, Hunter said aloud, shaking his head violently. No, he is playing a trick. He is the janitor. He found those papers in the trash. He is pretending. He has to be pretending. But the doubt had taken root. It was a cold, gnawing worm in his stomach. He looked at the forged power of attorney in his hand. If I really was the owner of King Enterprises, then Hunter hadn't just tried to scam a helpless old man. He had just attempted to defraud one of the most powerful men in the state. He had tried to sell $1 billion asset with a piece of paper bought for $3,000. He felt a vibration in his pocket. It was his phone. A notification from his news feed popped up. It was an announcement for the annual charity gala happening that night. The headline read, Mystery Chairman of King Enterprises to make rare public appearance. Hunter stared at the screen. He needed to know. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He needed to prove that I was a fraud, or he needed to beg for his life. He looked at his watch. The gala started in 4 hours. He had no money. He had no invitation. But he had desperation, and desperation is a powerful fuel. He started walking toward the pawn shop. He still had Nia's engagement ring in his pocket. It was the last thing of value he possessed. He was going to bet it all on one final roll of the dice. He was going to the ball. Hunter sat in the leather chair of his corner office, a space he had rented to project an image of success he never actually possessed. The office was silent except for the buzzing of a fly against the glass. His staff had walked out 3 days ago when the payroll checks bounced. Now it was just him and the crushing weight of reality. His phone rang. It was not a client. It was the property manager for the building. Mr. Vance, the voice on the other line, said cold and final. We have not received the wire transfer for the last 3 months of rent. Our legal team has authorized a lockout. You have until tomorrow morning to vacate the premises before we change the locks and seize any assets remaining inside to cover your debt. Hunter ended the call without saying a word. He stared at the blank screen. His ad agency was his identity. Without the office, without the title of creative director, he was just a man with a lot of debt and a wife who was slowly realizing she had married a failure. He needed a miracle. He needed a cash injection so massive it would plug the holes in his sinking ship and keep him afloat for another year. He opened his laptop and refreshed the newsfeed he had been obsessing over for the last hour. The headline glared back at him. Annual charity gala to host elusive King Enterprises chairman. The article speculated on the identity of the man who had reshaped the city's skyline but never appeared in Vogue or Forbes. Tickets were sold out, but there was always a secondary market for the desperate and the wealthy. The price was $5,000 a seat, $10,000 for a couple. Hunter looked at his bank balance. 0. He looked at his credit cards. Frozen. He looked at the eviction notice in his pocket. He had nothing. But he had an idea. It was a manic, feverish idea born of pure survival instinct. If he could get into that room, if he could walk up to the chairman of King Enterprises, he could pitch his agency. He could sell his vision. He could get an investment. And if the chairman turned out to be me, if the impossible turned out to be true, then he would fall on his knees and beg. He would use Nia as a shield. He would cry. He would do whatever it took to get the money back. He stood up and ran out of the office. He drove the Porsche running on fumes back to the dark mansion on the hill. He found Nia sitting on the patio staring blankly at the empty pool which had been drained when the maintenance contract was canceled. "Get up," Hunter ordered, pulling her by the arm. "Get inside. We need your things." Naya stumbled after him. "What things?" "We have nothing left." Hunter. Hunter dragged her into the master closet. He started pulling boxes off the top shelf. He found it. The orange Hermes box. Inside was the Birkin bag I had bought her 5 years ago to celebrate her graduation. It was pristine leather, untouched, a symbol of a status she only pretended to have. "We are selling it," Hunter said, tucking the bag under his arm. "And the watch. Give me the Rolex." Nia clutched her wrist. "No, Hunter. Dad gave me this. It is the only thing I have left of him." Hunter grabbed her wrist and unclasped the watch with brutal efficiency. "Your dad is gone, Nia," he spat. "He abandoned us. He is either a senile old man rotting in a hotel room, or he is the monster who cut us off. Either way, this watch is the only thing standing between us and the street. We are going to the gala. We are going to meet the money." Nia started to cry, deep, heaving sobs that shook her frame. She tried to grab the watch back, but Hunter shoved her away. "Stop crying and get dressed," he commanded. "Put on the best gown you have. Fix your face. We are going to walk into that ballroom, and we are going to save our lives. This is an investment, Nia. It is the last gamble we have." He left her weeping on the floor and drove to the high-end pawn shop on Piedmont Road. He didn't negotiate. He took the first offer the broker gave him. $12,000 in cash for items worth $40,000. He didn't care. He grabbed the stack of $100 bills and felt a surge of adrenaline. It was enough. It was his ticket to the show. 3 hours later, the valet at the St. Regis Hotel looked at Hunter's Porsche with a practiced eye. He noted the brake dust on the rims and the slight scratch on the bumper signs of a car that was no longer being maintained. Hunter tossed him the keys with a feigned nonchalance and took Naya's arm. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the portico lights, but her eyes were dead. She looked like a prisoner being marched to her execution. Hunter wore his tuxedo, but it felt tighter than usual, constricting his chest. He patted the pocket where he kept his business cards. He was ready to pitch. They walked past the security checkpoint, handing over the exorbitant cash tickets Hunter had bought from a scalper in the parking lot. The usher scanned them, the light turning green. They were in. The ballroom was a sea of diamond silk and power. The air smelled of expensive perfume and success. A live orchestra played softly in the corner. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and caviar. Hunter took a glass and downed it in one gulp. He scanned the room, his eyes darting frantically, looking for the center of gravity. "Let's find our table," Hunter said, pulling Nia through the crowd. "We need to be close to the front. We need visibility." He checked the seating chart displayed on a large easel near the entrance. He ran his finger down the list of names. Table 1, Table 2, Table 3. He didn't see his name. He kept looking, his finger moving lower and lower. Finally, he found it. Mr. and Mrs. Vance. Table 99. 99, Hunter whispered. "Where is table 99? He looked around the vast room. The single-digit tables were clustered around the stage, bathed in warm golden light. The 20s and 30s radiated out from there. Hunter walked past the tables of senators, tech moguls, and old money families. He kept walking. He walked past the mid-tier executives. He walked past the local politicians. He reached the very back of the room. Table 99 was a small round table shoved into the corner next to the swinging doors of the service kitchen. It was dark. It was noisy. Every time a waiter kicked the door open, a blast of hot food-scented air and the clatter of dishes washed over them. "This is a mistake," Hunter hissed, staring at the centerpiece, which was noticeably smaller than the ones on the main tables. "Do they know who I am? I am a creative director. I should be in the inner circle." "Sit down," Hunter. Nia said, her voice flat. "Everyone is looking at us." Hunter sat his back to the wall. He felt small. He felt invisible. He had spent $12,000 to sit by the kitchen. But then he looked up. He looked across the sea of heads toward the stage. Table 1 was elevated on a small platform. It was the sun around which the rest of the room orbited. The lighting was designed to draw every eye to it. Seated there were the mayor of Atlanta, the governor, and the CEO of the largest bank in the South. They were all leaning in, listening with rapt attention to a man sitting in the center chair. The man had his back to Hunter. He had broad shoulders draped in a suit that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. His hair was gray, cut close and precise. He held himself with a stillness that commanded the room without saying a word. Hunter squinted. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. The silhouette was familiar. The set of the shoulders, the way the man held his head. It triggered a memory of a man sitting at a kitchen island eating oatmeal with the same straight-backed posture. Nia, Hunter whispered, grabbing her hand. "Look at table 1. The man in the middle." Nia looked. She squinted against the glare of the spotlight. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "It looks like Dad," she breathed, the shape of his head. "Hunter, it looks exactly like him." "Don't be stupid," Hunter snapped, though his own heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Your dad is a mechanic. He is hiding in a hotel room spending his pension. That man is the chairman of King Enterprises. That is a billionaire. There is no way." But the doubt was there. It was a cold, heavy stone in his gut. Hunter watched as a waiter approached table 1 and poured wine for the man. The man didn't turn around. He just raised a hand in a small gesture of thanks. It was the same gesture I used when Nia poured me juice on Sunday mornings. Hunter felt a line of sweat trickle down his back. He needed to see his face. He needed to know. If that was me, if the man he had evicted was the man sitting at the right hand of the governor, then Hunter, Vance, was not just broke. He was dead. He stood up. "Where are you going?" Nia asked, grabbing his sleeve. "I am going to get a closer look," Hunter said, shaking her off. "I have to know." He began to weave through the tables, moving from the darkness of the kitchen corner toward the light of the stage. He was a moth flying straight into the incinerator. He didn't care about etiquette. He didn't care about the stairs. He only cared about the face of the man at table 1. He had to see the eyes of the king. Hunter navigated the labyrinth of round tables and seated guests with the grace of a man fleeing a crime scene. He bumped into the chair of a senator's wife, mumbling a half-hearted apology without looking back. His eyes were locked on the figure at table 1. The distance between the kitchen doors and the stage was only 100 feet, but to Hunter it felt like crossing a desert. The air in the ballroom grew hotter and heavier with every step he took toward the inner circle. The scent of expensive perfume and roasted duck became suffocating. He was sweating through his tuxedo, the starch of his collar digging into his neck like a wire garrote. Nia trailed behind him, her hand gripping the fabric of her silver gown to keep it from dragging on the floor. She was trembling. She kept her eyes fixed on the back of the man sitting in the center seat of the VIP table. The silhouette was hauntingly familiar. The set of the shoulders, the way the head was held high and still. It was the posture of a man who had spent a lifetime carrying burdens without complaining. It was the posture of her father. "Hunter," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of conversation. "Stop. Please stop. Look at him. Look at the way he sits. That is Dad. I know it is him." Hunter spun around, grabbing her wrist with enough force to bruise. He pulled her close, his face contorted with a mixture of fear and rage. "You are insane," he hissed. "Your father is a mechanic. He is a nobody. He is probably sleeping on a park bench right now or eating out of a dumpster in an alley. He is not sitting at the right hand of the governor. He is not drinking vintage wine with billionaires. Stop hallucinating. We are here to find the money. We are here to save our lives. Do not ruin this for me." He pushed her away and turned back to the stage. He took another step and then another. He was close now, only 10 feet away. He could see the texture of the man's suit jacket. He could see the gray hairs on the back of his neck cut with military precision. Hunter's breath hitched in his throat. The doubt was clawing at his inside, screaming at him to turn around and run, but his greed was stronger. He had to see the face. He had to prove himself right. He had to prove that I was nothing more than the help he had discarded. The lights in the ballroom suddenly dimmed. The murmur of the crowd died down instantly, replaced by an expectant silence. A spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the podium on the stage. The master of ceremonies walked out. He was a famous news anchor, a man whose face was known to everyone in the room. He adjusted the microphone and smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and friends," he began, his voice booming through the speakers. "Tonight is a night of celebration. We are here to honor the spirit of giving that makes Atlanta the jewel of the South, but we are also here to solve a mystery. For decades, there has been a silent force behind the growth of our city. A man who has built hospitals, funded schools, and reshaped our skyline, all while remaining in the shadows." Hunter froze. He stood just behind the circle of light bathing table 1. He was close enough to reach out and touch the man's chair. He held a glass of red wine he had snatched from a passing tray, his knuckles white around the stem. This man founded King Enterprises 40 years ago with nothing but a toolbox and a dream, the MC continued. He built an empire on the principles of hard work, integrity, and humility. He has never sought the limelight. He has never asked for recognition. But tonight, he has graciously agreed to step forward and lead us into a new era of philanthropy. Nia let out a small, choked sob. She put her hand over her mouth. She knew. The biography was too specific. The timeline was exact. "Please join me," the MC said, his voice rising to a crescendo. "Please join me in welcoming the founder, the chairman, the soul of King Enterprises, and the man who changed the face of Atlanta forever. Mr. Langston King." The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Hunter stopped breathing. His heart stopped beating. The world narrowed down to a single point of focus. The man at table 1 placed his napkin on the table. He pushed his chair back. He stood up. I stood up. I felt the eyes of 500 people on me. I felt the heat of the spotlight. I adjusted the cuffs of my tuxedo jacket and turned around. I did not look at the governor. I did not look at the mayor. I looked directly behind me. I looked straight into the eyes of Hunter Vance. He was standing there, frozen, mouth agape, looking like a man who had just seen a ghost. He saw the face he had spat on. He saw the face he had mocked. He saw the face of the man he had tried to declare insane. But there was no confusion in my eyes tonight. There was no weakness. There was only power. I held his gaze for a second. Just 1 second. I let him see the truth. I let him see that the mechanic was the king. I let him see that he had been living in my shadow, eating my food, and sleeping under my roof, all while convincing himself he was the master. Then I smiled. It was a cold, imperceptible curving of the lips, and I turned my back on him. I walked toward the stairs of the stage. The room erupted. The applause was deafening. It was a wave of sound that crashed over Hunter and Nia, drowning them. People stood up. They cheered. They whistled. They honored the man Hunter had thrown out like trash. Hunter's hand went limp. The glass of red wine slipped from his fingers. It fell in slow motion, tumbling through the air. It hit the floor right next to Nia. The glass shattered. The dark red liquid exploded outward, splashing up the front of her shimmering silver gown. It looked like a gunshot wound. It looked like blood. Nia screamed, but the sound was lost in the applause. She looked down at her ruined dress, the dress she had sold her heritage to buy. She looked at Hunter. He was not looking at her. He was staring at me as I shook the hand of the MC and took the microphone. Hunter's legs gave out. He collapsed into an empty chair at table 2, uninvited. He sat there, his face pale as ash, watching the man he had called a useless old fool command the respect of the most powerful people in the state. He realized in that moment that he hadn't just burned a bridge. He had bombed the very ground he was standing on. He was a dead man walking, and the executioner had just taken the stage. The applause was dying down when Hunter's survival instinct finally kicked in. It was a feral, desperate thing that bypassed his shame completely. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand and stood up from the empty chair he had collapsed into. He looked at the stage where I stood, bathed in light. He didn't see a man he had wronged. He didn't see a father he had disrespected. He saw an ATM. He saw a lifeline. He saw a way out of the hole he had dug for himself. He grabbed Nia's arm. Her dress was stained red with wine, looking like a gruesome wound across her chest. She tried to pull away, tears streaming down her face, but Hunter's grip was iron. He dragged her toward the stage. Dad, Hunter screamed. His voice cracked high and desperate, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Dad, we are here. We made it." He shoved people aside. He knocked over a chair. He didn't care. He had to get to the podium. He had to claim me before the world realized he was a stranger. He plastered a smile on his face that was terrifying in its falseness. It was a rictus of greed. "It is us," Hunter shouted, waving his arms like a man shipwrecked on an island seeing a plane. "Everyone look. That is my father-in-law. That is family. We are so proud of you, Dad. We knew you could do it." Nia stumbled behind him, her head bowed in humiliation. She knew what this was. She knew how pathetic it looked. But Hunter was immune to dignity. He reached the stairs of the stage and started to climb. He looked out at the crowd of billionaires and politicians, his chest heaving. "He is a modest man," Hunter announced to the room, acting as if he were the master of ceremonies. He kept this a secret even from us because he is so humble. But we are here now. The family is reunited. 2 large security guards in dark suits stepped out from the shadows of the wings. They moved to intercept Hunter before he could reach the microphone. One of them reached for his arm. Hunter flinched, his smile faltering for a second. "Do not touch me," Hunter snapped at the guard. "I am his son. I am family." The guard looked at me for instruction. I stood at the podium, my hand resting on the microphone stand. I looked at Hunter. I looked at the wine stain on Naya's dress. I looked at the desperation radiating off him like heat waves. I could have had him thrown out quietly. I could have spared him the final public execution. But he had not spared me. He had thrown my breakfast on the floor. He had told me to leave my own house. He had tried to sell my company's headquarters for cash. Mercy was a luxury he could not afford. "Let him speak," I said. My voice was amplified by the speakers booming through the hall. "Let him come up." The guard stepped back. Hunter beamed. He thought he had won. He thought I was playing along to save face. He practically ran the last few steps to the podium. He reached for my hand, trying to shake it, trying to create a photo opportunity that would save his career. "Dad," he said breathless. "Thank God. We were so worried about you. We have been looking everywhere. Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you manage all this. You know I have a head for business." I did not take his hand. I stepped back, creating a physical chasm between us on that stage. I looked at him with the cold curiosity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting virus. "Who are you?" I asked. The question hung in the air. Hunter's smile froze. He laughed nervously, looking out at the audience. "Good one, Dad," he said. He is always joking. "It is me, Hunter, your son-in-law, Nia's husband. We live together. We are family." I turned to the audience. I looked at the mayor. I looked at the governor. I looked at the hundreds of faces waiting for my next word. "This man says he is my family," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of anger, which made it all the more terrifying. "He says he lives with me, and that is true. For 3 years I lived in the guest room of the house I bought for his wife. I paid the mortgage, I paid the bills. I watched him play the part of a successful executive while I fixed the leaks in the roof he lived under." Hunter's smile vanished. He took a step back. "Dad, don't," he whispered. "Not here." I ignored him. Last week I continued addressing the crowd. This man walked into the kitchen where I was eating my breakfast. He kicked my chair. He commanded me to make him an espresso because his maid was sick. When I refused, he threw a bowl of hot oatmeal onto the floor. He humiliated me. He told me I was a useless old man, and then he gave me an ultimatum: serve him or get out. A collective gasp went through the room. It started as a low murmur and rose to a roar of shock. People covered their mouths. They looked at Hunter with open disgust. The social elite of Atlanta did not tolerate disrespect toward their own, and I was now one of them. "That is not true," Hunter stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "He is confused. He is senile. He is making it up. I evicted him," I said, cutting through his lies. "I walked out with a suitcase and I evicted him, and do you know what he did? He tried to have me committed to a mental institution so he could steal my pension. He broke into my private safe to find cash. And today, he tried to sell a piece of land he thought was empty to a loan shark." Hunter looked like he was going to vomit. He looked at Nia, begging her to say something to defend him. But Nia was staring at the floor, tears dripping onto the red stain on her dress. She knew it was all true. "But here's the best part," I said. I turned back to Hunter. "You came here tonight looking for an investor. You came here to save your failing ad agency. You thought you could charm the chairman of King Enterprises." I leaned in close to the microphone. "Well, Hunter, you have his attention." Hunter opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was a fish on a hook, gasping for air. "I reviewed your file this morning," I said. "Your agency rents the entire 4th floor of the King Tower downtown. You are 6 months behind on rent. You have ignored every notice. You thought the landlord wouldn't notice because you are a big-shot creative director." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my tuxedo pocket. I unfolded it slowly. "As of this morning, King Enterprises has officially terminated your commercial lease," I announced. "The locks have been changed. Your equipment has been seized to cover a portion of your debt. And since you used your personal guarantee on the lease, you are personally liable for the remainder." I dropped the paper at his feet. "You are bankrupt, Hunter," I said. "You have no company. You have no office. You have no home. You are exactly what you accused me of being. You are a beggar." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Hunter stared at the paper on the floor. His legs finally gave out. He dropped to his knees, not in supplication but in total collapse. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't do this." "Security," I said, stepping back from the podium. "Please remove this trespasser from my stage. He is ruining the celebration." The two guards moved in. They didn't ask this time. They grabbed Hunter by the arms and hauled him up. He dragged his feet, sobbing, begging, a broken man being carried out of the palace he thought he could conquer. Nia followed them, her head down, a ghost in a stained dress walking into the darkness. I watched them go. Then I turned back to the microphone. I smiled at the crowd. "Now," I said, "who is ready to talk about the future of this city?" The applause that followed was not just polite, it was thunderous. It was the sound of justice being served cold on a silver platter in front of everyone who mattered. The morning sun did not bring warmth to the estate on Highland Avenue. It only illuminated the wreckage of a life that had been dismantled overnight. Inside the mansion, the air was thick with the smell of stale sweat and panic. Hunter and Nia were throwing clothes into garbage bags. They did not fold them. They did not organize them. They grabbed armfuls of designer suits and silk dresses and shoved them into black plastic sacks like common trash. The eviction deadline was noon. They had 2 hours left. Hunter moved with the frantic energy of a trapped animal. His tuxedo from the night before was crumpled on the floor, stained with sweat and the memory of his public execution. He was wearing gym shorts and a t-shirt, now stripping away the costume of the executive to reveal the desperate man underneath. A heavy pounding on the front door froze them in place. It was not a polite knock. It was the authoritative thud of the law. Hunter looked at Nia. Her eyes were wide with terror. He walked to the door, his bare feet slapping against the cold marble. He opened it. Standing on the porch was Mr. Wallace. Behind him stood 2 uniformed sheriff deputies and a man in a plain suit who held a leather portfolio. Wallace did not smile. He did not offer a greeting. He simply extended a hand holding a thick stack of documents. "Mr. Hunter Vance Wallace," said, his voice cutting through the morning silence like a scalpel. "You are hereby served." Hunter stared at the papers. "Served? For what?" Wallace began to list the charges with a detachment that made them sound even more terrifying. Civil suit for elder abuse and financial exploitation. Criminal complaint for credit card fraud in the amount of $42,000. Civil suit for destruction of private property regarding the antique safe in the study. And a restraining order prohibiting you from coming within 500 feet of Mr. Langston King or any property owned by King Enterprises. The deputy stepped forward. "We also have a warrant for the seizure of any assets purchased with the fraudulent funds," the deputy said. "That includes the electronics, the jewelry, and the vehicle parked in the driveway. Keys, please." Hunter stepped back, clutching the doorframe. "You can't do this," he stammered. "It was a misunderstanding. I was managing his finances. I had implied consent. There is no implied consent for drilling into a safe," Mr. Vance Wallace said, cold. "And there is certainly no consent for attempting to sell commercial property you do not own. You have 10 minutes to gather your personal effects. Anything left behind will be cataloged as evidence." Nia screamed from the hallway. She ran past Hunter, clutching a bag of clothes. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at Wallace. She ran straight for her car, the modest sedan she had kept before the marriage, the only thing that was truly hers. She threw the bag in the back seat and reversed down the driveway, tires spinning on the asphalt. She left Hunter standing there alone in the doorway, holding the indictment of his life in his shaking hands. Nia drove like a madwoman through the city streets. She ran red lights. She honked at pedestrians. She was driven by a singular, overwhelming instinct for self-preservation. She knew the ship was going down and she wasn't going to drown with the captain. She parked haphazardly in front of the Ritz-Carlton and ran into the lobby. Her hair was a mess. She was wearing yoga pants and a stained sweatshirt. She looked nothing like the socialite she pretended to be. She demanded to see her father. The concierge, recognizing the desperation in her eyes, made a call. A minute later, he nodded her toward the elevator. She burst into the penthouse suite. I was sitting on the balcony reading the morning paper and drinking a cup of coffee. I looked up as she collapsed onto the floor in front of me. She crawled toward my chair, tears streaming down her face, ruining the expensive rug. "Dad," she wailed. "Dad, please, you have to help me. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Hunter manipulated me. He told me it was legal. He told me you wanted us to have the money. I was scared of him, Dad. He has a temper. I was a victim too. She grabbed my hand, pressing her face against my knuckles. Save me, Daddy, she sobbed. I am your little girl. Don't let them take me to court. Don't let me end up on the street. I pulled my hand away gently but firmly. I stood up and walked to the edge of the balcony. I looked out at the city I had helped build. I thought about the day she was born. I thought about the promises I made to protect her. But then I thought about the morning in the kitchen. I turned back to her. She looked up at me with hopeful, wet eyes. Nia, I said softly, you stood in that kitchen. You stood 3 feet away from me. You watched him kick my chair. You watched him throw a bowl of hot oatmeal at me. You watched him humiliate me in my own home. I didn't know what to do, she whispered. You knew exactly what to do, I corrected her. You chose to do nothing. You chose him. You chose the lifestyle he promised you over the father who gave you everything. You were not a victim, Nia. You were an accomplice. You signed the checks. You drove the car. You wore the diamonds. You enjoyed the fruit of the poisonous tree just as much as he did. I walked over to the desk and picked up a single piece of paper. I am not suing you, Nia, I said. The lawsuits are named against Hunter. You are not a defendant. She let out a breath of relief, her shoulders sagging. Thank God. Thank you, Dad. I knew you wouldn't hurt me. I am not suing you, I repeated. But I am not saving you either. Her relief vanished. What I have cut you off, Nia. Completely. There is no trust fund. There is no allowance. There is no safety net. You are 32 years old. You have a degree I paid for. You have a car I paid for. That is all you get. But I have nowhere to go, she cried. I have no money for rent. Then get a job, I said cold. Serve coffee, scrub floors, do whatever you have to do. Taste real life, Nia. Taste the bitterness of earning $1 with your own sweat. It is the only way you will ever learn to respect it. Now get out. She stared at me for a long moment. She saw the resolve in my eyes. She realized that the bank of Dad was not just closed, it was demolished. She stood up slowly. She wiped her face. She didn't say goodbye. She walked out the door, stepping into a world she was wholly unprepared for. Across town, Hunter was learning a different kind of lesson. He had been escorted off the property by the sheriff. He stood on the sidewalk with 2 garbage bags of clothes. His Porsche was gone, towed by the repo man. His wife was gone. He had nothing. He sat on the curb, head in his hands, trying to figure out who he could call. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. A man with a thick neck and a scar running down his cheek looked out. It was Vinny, the collector for the loan shark Hunter owed $50,000 to. The debt from the gambling. The debt he was supposed to pay with the sale of lot number 9. Hey, Hunter, Vinny said, smiling a smile that showed too many teeth. We heard you had a rough night. We heard your big deal fell through. Hunter scrambled backward, tripping over his garbage bag. Vinny. Listen, Hunter stammered. I just need a few days. My father-in-law, he is restructuring some assets. I will have the money next week. Vinny opened the door and stepped out. He was holding a tire iron. We saw the news, Hunter, Vinny said, tapping the iron against his palm. We saw the gala. You are broke. You have no assets. You have no father-in-law. You have nothing but a debt. And my boss. He doesn't like bad debt. Hunter tried to run. He didn't get far. Vinny swung the tire iron. It connected with Hunter's right shin with a sickening crunch. Hunter screamed and went down. Vinny hit him again, shattering the kneecap. Consider this the interest payment, Vinny said, looking down at the writhing man. We will be back for the principal next month. Find a way to pay Hunter. Or next time we aim for the head. Vinny got back in the SUV and drove away. Hunter lay on the sidewalk alone, broken and screaming in agony. He looked up at the sky. He thought about the oatmeal he had thrown. He thought about the old man he had kicked. And as the pain washed over him in waves, he realized that the universe had a very brutal way of balancing the books. Pain radiated from Hunter's shattered right leg with every uneven step he took along the cracked pavement of Highland Avenue. The plaster cast was heavy, a dead weight dragging him down, but the rage burning in his chest was heavier. It had been 3 days since Vinny and the tire iron had redefined his reality. 3 days of sleeping in a cardboard box behind a convenience store. 3 days of the throbbing, blinding agony of a broken kneecap that had not been set by a doctor, but wrapped in duct tape and stolen bandages. He smelled of unwashed skin and cheap gasoline. In his good hand, he gripped the handle of a red plastic jerry can filled with 5 gallons of fuel. It was the last purchase he would ever make. He stopped at the bottom of the driveway. The estate loomed above him, a dark silhouette against the night sky. It was no longer his castle. It was a fortress that had expelled him. Yellow police tape stretched across the front door like a warning sash. An eviction notice was plastered to the wood, a white square of legal defeat visible even in the moonlight. Hunter stared at the house. He did not see the architecture or the beauty. He saw the symbol of everything that had been taken from him. He saw Langston. He blamed the old man for the pain in his leg. He blamed him for the loss of the Porsche. He blamed him for Nia leaving. In Hunter's twisted, feverish mind, Langston was not the victim of elder abuse. Langston was a thief who had stolen Hunter's future. "If I cannot live here," Hunter whispered to the darkness, his voice raspy and cracked, "then no one will." He hobbled up the driveway. The crutch dug into his armpit. The gas can sloshed rhythmically. He bypassed the front door with its new digital locks and cameras. He went around the back to the patio doors. He knew the lock on the left door was sticky. He had meant to fix it for 3 years but never got around to it. He jammed the tip of his crutch into the gap and levered it. The glass shattered. The sound was loud, too loud in the quiet night, but he didn't care. He reached in, undid the latch, and slid the door open. He stepped into the living room. The air inside was stale and hot. The furniture was gone, seized by the sheriff to pay his debts. The room was an empty cavern of hardwood floors and shadows. Hunter limped to the center of the room. He unscrewed the cap of the gas can. The fumes hit him immediately, a sharp chemical sting that made his eyes water. He didn't flinch. He began to pour. He splashed the gasoline in wide arcs. He coated the spot where the expensive Italian sofa used to sit. He drenched the baseboards. He poured a trail leading toward the grand staircase. "This is for the humiliation," he muttered, swinging the can. He saw Langston's face in every shadow. He heard the applause of the gala crowd in the silence of the house. The madness that had been gnawing at the edges of his mind for days finally took hold. He wasn't just burning a house. He was burning the evidence of his failure. He was burning the stage where he had played the fool. He backed away toward the patio door, trailing a line of fuel. He emptied the last drops onto the threshold. He dropped the empty can. It clattered hollowly on the floor. Hunter reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver lighter. It was engraved with his initials, a gift he had bought for himself with the first money he stole from my pension account. He flicked the lid open. The flame danced small and yellow in the darkness. "Goodbye, Langston," he whispered. He dropped the lighter. The ignition was instantaneous. A whoosh of air sucked past him as the gasoline caught. A wall of orange fire erupted in the living room, climbing the walls with terrifying speed. The heat was intense, blistering his skin instantly. The fire roared, a living beast consuming the oxygen. Hunter watched it for a second, a sick smile twisting his face. He turned to leave, to limp away into the night, and watch the destruction from a safe distance. But he had forgotten who built this house. He had forgotten that Langston King was not just a landlord, he was an engineer. He was a man who obsessed over details, over safety, over protecting his investments. As the temperature in the room spiked, sensors embedded in the ceiling blinked red. They were not standard smoke detectors. They were part of a commercial-grade fire suppression system I had installed to protect the art collection I originally kept there. A mechanical hum vibrated through the floorboards. Hunter reached for the handle of the patio door. Click-thunk. A steel deadbolt slammed home, driven by an electronic solenoid. The smart home system had detected a rapid heat rise and engaged the containment protocol to prevent the fire from spreading to the neighboring properties. Hunter yanked on the handle. It wouldn't budge. He smashed the glass with his crutch, but the security laminate held it together in a spiderweb of cracks. He was locked in. Then the ceiling opened up. It wasn't water that came down. Water would have spread the gasoline fire. It was a high-density chemical foam, a thick, white, suffocating blanket designed to starve the fire of oxygen instantly. It blasted from high-pressure nozzles in every corner of the room. Hunter screamed as the foam hit him. It was cold and heavy. It coated him instantly, filling his eyes, his nose, his mouth. It knocked him off his feet. He slipped on the slick floor and fell hard on his broken leg. The agony was blinding. He tried to crawl, but the foam was rising rapidly, filling the room like a blizzard. It covered the fire, extinguishing the flames in seconds, leaving only thick white smoke and darkness. He was trapped in a white void. He couldn't see. He couldn't breathe. The foam pinned him to the floor, weighing down his clothes, making it impossible to stand with his shattered knee. He flailed in the dark, coughing, gagging on the chemical taste. "Please," he choked out. "Help me." Outside, the silent alarm had already alerted the authorities. The wail of sirens cut through the night air, getting louder and closer. Blue and red lights flashed against the foam-covered windows, creating a strobe effect inside the house. The front door was breached with a battering ram. Police officers and firefighters in full gear stormed into the hallway. They pushed through the foam, their flashlights cutting beams through the chemical fog. They found Hunter curled in a fetal position near the patio door, covered in white sludge, shivering violently from shock and pain. He looked like a broken statue pulled from the sea. The empty gas can lay next to him, the smoking gun that would seal his fate. An officer grabbed him by the arm and hauled him up. Hunter couldn't even stand. He hung limp in their grip, gasping for air, his eyes burning. "Hunter Vance," the officer said, his voice muffled by a gas mask. "You are under arrest for arson, breaking and entering, and criminal destruction of property." Hunter tried to speak, but all that came out was a cough. He looked around the room. The fire was out. The house was still standing. The structure was sound. He had failed. Even in his final act of destruction, he had failed. "The house I built was stronger than his hate." They dragged him out to the police cruiser. The neighborhood had woken up. People stood on their lawns in their pajamas, watching the spectacle. They saw the man who used to drive a Porsche and sneer at them being loaded into the back of a squad car, covered in foam, his leg dragging uselessly behind him. I watched the live feed from the exterior security cameras on my laptop. I saw the flashing lights. I saw the handcuffs. I saw the end of Hunter Vance. I closed the laptop. The fire was out, but for Hunter, the burning had just begun. He was going to a place where there were no smart systems to save him, and where the debts he owed would be collected in years, not dollars. The fluorescent lights of the Superior Court buzzed with a low, irritating hum that matched the tension in the room. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, my hands resting on the handle of my cane. I wore the same Armani suit I had worn at the gala, a silent reminder of the power I held. But today I did not feel powerful. I felt tired. Hunter sat at the defense table wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His leg was still in a cast, propped up on a chair. He looked diminished, a shadow of the arrogant man who had thrown my breakfast on the floor. But his eyes were still full of hate. He did not look at the judge. He looked at me. His lawyer was a court-appointed defender with a cheap suit and a desperate strategy. He stood up to make his closing argument. He walked back and forth in front of the jury box, gesturing wildly at me. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the lawyer began, his voice shrill. "You have heard the evidence. You have seen the videos. But you must ask yourselves why a man like Hunter Vance, a creative professional with a bright future, would be driven to such extremes. The answer sits right there." He pointed a finger at me. Langston King is a billionaire who played a cruel game with his family. He hoarded his wealth. He lived in their house like a pauper, watching them struggle, watching them drown in debt and refusing to help. He drove them to madness with his miserliness. He was a cold, distant father who neglected his daughter and her husband, pushing them to the brink of financial ruin. Hunter Vance is not a criminal. He is a victim of emotional and financial abuse by a man who values money more than his own blood. Nia sat in the back of the courtroom. She was alone. She wore a simple black dress, the only one she had left that wasn't stained or soiled. She looked at the floor as the lawyer tore apart my character. She didn't speak. She didn't object. She let him paint me as the villain because a part of her still wanted to believe it was true. It was easier to believe I was a monster than to admit she was ungrateful. Mr. Wallace stood up for the rebuttal. He didn't walk. He marched to the podium. He didn't carry a stack of financial records or legal precedents. He carried a single small book bound in faded blue velvet. It was worn at the corners. The spine was cracked. It looked like nothing, but to me it was everything. "Your Honor," Wallace said, his voice deep and resonant. "The defense claims that Mr. King was a negligent father who hoarded his wealth and let his family suffer. They claim his silence was cruelty. They claim his modesty was a weapon." Wallace held up the blue book. "This is the personal diary of Etta King, the late wife of Langston King and the mother of Nia Vance. It was entered into evidence this morning. I would like to read a few entries that shed light on the true nature of the man sitting in this courtroom." Hunter rolled his eyes. He slumped in his chair, expecting sentimental drivel. Nia looked up, her eyes locked onto the book. She recognized it. She had seen it on her mother's nightstand for years, but she had never opened it. Wallace opened the book to a page marked with a yellow tab. Entry dated September 12th, 1995. Wallace read, Langston came home this morning with his hands bandaged. He burned them, fixing the boiler at the factory during his third shift. He told me not to worry. He said the extra money would pay for Nia's private school tuition. He doesn't want her to know. He wants her to think we have enough. He wants her to focus on her grades, not our struggle. He is so tired, Etta wrote, but he smiles every time he sees her in that uniform. The courtroom was silent. I looked down at my hands. The scars were still there, faint white lines under the expensive watch. Nia covered her mouth with her hand. A tear slipped out. Wallace turned the page. Entry dated June 4th, 2005, he continued. Nia wants a car for her 16th birthday. All her friends are getting BMWs. Langston has been investing every penny we save into the land deals downtown. He could buy her 10 cars if he sold one lot, but he won't. He says if she gets everything easy, she will never learn to build anything of her own. So he took a second mortgage on our home to buy her a safe, reliable Honda. He told her it was all we could afford. She cried and said she hated it. She said she hated us. Langston cried in the garage that night. He said he failed her because he couldn't give her the world. But he is giving her something better. He is giving her character. I just hope she forgives him one day. Nia let out a sob. It was a sharp, ragged sound that echoed off the high ceilings. She remembered that day. She remembered screaming at me because the car wasn't a convertible. She remembered the look on my face. She thought it was shame. Now she realized it was heartbreak. Wallace closed the book. He looked directly at the jury. Then he looked at Hunter. Langston King did not hide his wealth to punish his family, Wallace said softly. He hid it to protect them. He wanted to raise a daughter who valued hard work, not a trust fund baby who felt entitled to the world. He failed, but not because he was negligent. He failed because he loved them too much to let them fall until they forced his hand. Hunter Vance is not a victim. He is a parasite who consumed the host and then tried to burn down the house when the meal was over. Wallace sat down. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with the weight of 20 years of misunderstood sacrifices. Nia was shaking. Her entire body trembled. She looked at the back of my head. I could feel her gaze. It was burning with a sudden, terrifying clarity. She realized that every sandwich I ate, every old shirt I wore, every vacation I didn't take was a deposit in an account labeled Nia, and she had squandered it all on a man who was currently picking at a loose thread on his jumpsuit looking bored. The jury did not take long. They didn't need hours to deliberate. They had seen the video of the arson. They had heard the recordings of the conspiracy. And now they had heard the voice of a dead mother testifying from the grave. They returned in 45 minutes. We find the defendant Hunter Vance guilty on all counts, the foreman announced. The judge looked at Hunter over his spectacles. He saw no remorse. He saw only arrogance and entitlement. Hunter Vance, the judge, said, his voice like a gavel strike. For the crimes of arson, grand larceny, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud, I sentence you to 8 years in state prison. You will be eligible for parole in 5 years provided you pay full restitution to the victim. Hunter screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of outrage. You can't do this, he yelled as the bailiffs grabbed him. I am a creative director. I have a career. This is a mistake. Nia, do something. Call someone. Nia stood up. She looked at her husband being dragged away. She looked at his twisted face, his greed, his selfishness. She saw him for the first time without the filter of his lies. I have no one to call Hunter, she whispered. The bailiffs hauled him out the side door. His screams faded into the hallway. The courtroom began to empty. I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane. I felt lighter. The burden of the secret was gone. The burden of the parasite was gone. I turned to leave. Nia was standing in the aisle. Her face was swollen and red. She looked at me, her hands twisting together. She wanted to speak. She wanted to apologize. She wanted to fall into my arms and be the little girl in the diary again. I stopped. I looked at her. I saw the regret. I saw the pain, but I also saw the woman who had let it happen. I am sorry, Dad, she choked out. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know how much you did. I know, I said softly. That was the problem, Nia. You never looked close enough to see. I walked past her. I didn't hug her. I didn't offer her money. I didn't offer her a ride. I walked out of the courtroom and into the bright afternoon sun. I had won the war, but I had lost my daughter. And as I got into this back of the town car, I realized that was the price I had to pay to finally teach her the lesson she refused to learn. She was on her own now, and for the first time in her life, she was going to have to survive without the safety net of Langston King. The rain in Atlanta was relentless that November. It was the kind of cold, soaking rain that seeped into your bones and made the city look gray and unforgiving. Nia stood behind the counter of the 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the industrial district. Her feet were swollen inside cheap, non-slip shoes. Her back ached with a dull, throbbing pain she had never known existed. She was wearing a polyester uniform that smelled of grease and stale coffee, a far cry from the silk and cashmere she used to wear as armor. It had been 6 months since the trial. 6 months since she walked out of the courtroom alone. 6 months since her world had collapsed and she had to rebuild it from the rubble. She lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat that shook every time the spin cycle started. She had no car, she took the bus, and she had learned that the world did not care about her last name or the parties she used to throw. "Hey, waitress," a customer shouted from booth 4. "My coffee is cold and my eggs are rubber. Are you stupid or just lazy?" Nia flinched. The man was heavy-set, wearing a stained trucker hat. He looked at her with the same disdain she used to reserve for the cleaning staff at the estate. She felt a flash of the old anger, the urge to tell him who she was, to scream that she was the daughter of Langston King. But then she remembered the eviction notice. She remembered the empty bank account. She remembered the look on her father's face in the courtroom. "I am sorry, sir," Nia said, her voice quiet and steady. "Let me get you a fresh pot and I will ask the cook to remake the eggs." She took the plate. The man grunted, not even looking at her. She walked back to the kitchen, scraping the untouched food into the trash. As she watched the eggs slide into the bin, a memory hit her so hard she almost dropped the plate. She remembered the morning in the kitchen with Hunter. She remembered the oatmeal on the floor. She remembered how she had stood there silent and superior while her father cleaned up a mess he didn't make. She remembered telling him he was difficult. She remembered the cruelty of her own silence. Tears pricked her eyes hot and stinging. She wiped them away with her apron. She didn't have time to cry. She had tables to turn. She had rent to pay. She realized now that her father hadn't just been cleaning up oatmeal. He had been cleaning up her entire life, absorbing the insults, the ingratitude, and the disrespect so she wouldn't have to feel the weight of the world. And now that the weight was fully on her shoulders, she understood just how strong he had been. She wasn't a victim. She was a woman who was finally learning how to be human. Outside, the rain intensified, turning the streets into rivers of black asphalt. A sleek black Lincoln town car pulled up to the curb across the street from the diner. The windows were tinted impenetrable to the casual observer. Inside, I sat in the back seat watching the neon sign of the diner flicker against the wet glass. I told Thomas to cut the engine but keep the lights off. I didn't want to be seen. I just wanted to know. I watched through the large front window of the diner. It was late past midnight. The place was mostly empty, save for a few truckers and insomniacs. I saw a woman moving between the tables. She was thin-tired and moving with the efficiency I had never seen in her before. It was Nia. She was wiping down a table, her arm moving in wide circular motions. She lifted a heavy tray of dirty dishes and carried it to the back. She looked exhausted. She looked nothing like the girl who used to spend $500 on a lunch. Thomas cleared his throat from the front seat. "Do you want me to go in, sir? Do you want to bring her home?" I looked at her. I saw her stop to count her tips. She carefully folded the dollar bills and put them in her pocket. She didn't look disgusted by the small amount. She looked relieved. "No, Thomas," I said softly. "Not yet. She is still cooking." I watched as she went back to the counter to refill the sugar dispensers. She was working. She was surviving. She wasn't calling me for money. She wasn't begging. She was doing exactly what I told her to do. She was tasting real life. It was painful to watch seeing my child struggle, but I knew that if I stepped in now, if I saved her from the discomfort, I would rob her of the lesson. I would turn her back into the dependent, entitled person who watched her husband abuse me. This struggle was the fire that would burn away the rot. Suddenly, Nia looked up. She looked through the rain-streaked window. Her eyes locked onto the black car parked across the street. It was dark, but the silhouette of the Lincoln was unmistakable. She knew that car. She knew the man inside. I tensed. I expected her to run out. I expected her to come banging on the window, demanding to be let in, demanding to be saved from the grease and the rude customers. I put my hand on the door handle, ready to tell Thomas to drive away if she made a scene. But she didn't move. She stood there holding a pot of coffee. She looked at the car. I could see her face clearly under the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner. She didn't look angry. She didn't look desperate. She looked ashamed. She looked at me or at where she knew I was, and she slowly lowered her head. It wasn't a nod of submission. It was a bow of respect. It was an acknowledgement. She was telling me she saw me. She was telling me she understood why I was there and why I wasn't coming in. She raised her hand and gave a small tentative wave. Then she turned around. She didn't run to the door. She went back to the counter. She picked up a rag and started cleaning the coffee machine. She went back to work. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A lump formed in my throat. It wasn't the reunion I had dreamed of when she was a child, but it was the first honest interaction we had shared in years. She didn't want my money. She wanted me to see that she could stand on her own. "Let's go, Thomas," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Thomas started the car. The engine purred to life. "Where to, Mr. King? Home," I said. As the car pulled away, I looked back one last time. Nia was still working her head down, focused on the task at hand. She was tired. She was poor. But for the first time in her life, she had dignity. And that was worth more than any trust fund I could have given her. The rain continued to fall, washing away the grime of the city, washing away the past. I knew then that she was going to be all right. It would take time. It would take hard work. But she was a king. And kings do not break. They rebuild. 2 years later, the sun was setting over the Atlantic Ocean, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. I sat on the deck of my yacht, the Etta, anchored off the coast of Savannah. The air was salty and warm. I was retired now, truly retired. I had handed over the daily operations of King Enterprises to a board of directors I trusted. I spent my days fishing, reading, and managing the foundation I had started in my wife's name. I was at peace. But there was still a silence in my life where my daughter used to be. Mr. Wallace walked onto the deck. He was holding a small, plain white envelope. He didn't look like a lawyer today. He looked like a friend delivering news. "This came to the office today," Langston Wallace said, handing me the envelope. "It has no return address, but the postmark is local." I took the envelope. It was light, flimsy. It wasn't the heavy, cream-colored stationery Nia used to favor. It was cheap paper you buy at the grocery store. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handmade card. On the front was a drawing of a bowl of oatmeal. It was sketched in pencil, simple and crude, but the detail was there. I opened the card. A small, rectangular piece of paper fluttered out and landed on my lap. It was a cashier's check. I picked it up. The amount was $50. I stared at the check. $50. It was nothing. It was less than I used to tip the valet. But as I held it, I felt a weight that far exceeded its value. I looked at the card. "Dear Dad," it read in Nia's familiar looping handwriting. "This is the first $50 I saved after paying off my last credit card debt. It took me 2 years. I work as a manager at the diner now. I rent a small house with a garden. I grow my own tomatoes. I know this money is nothing compared to what you gave me and nothing compared to what I took from you, but it is mine. It is clean, and I want you to have it." I turned the card over. "I am sorry," she wrote. "I am so sorry. Not for the money, but for the oatmeal. I invite you to breakfast. My treat. I make good oatmeal now. Love, Nia." I sat there for a long time looking at the check and the drawing. The wind ruffled the edges of the paper. I thought about the millions I had made. I thought about the skyscrapers and the deals. None of it felt as significant as this $50 check. This was the return on the hardest investment I had ever made. I put the check in my wallet, sliding it into the slot right next to the picture of Etta. It fit perfectly. "Cancel my meetings for tomorrow." "Wallace," I said, standing up. Wallace smiled. "Where are we going?" "We are going to breakfast," I said. "I have a date with my daughter, and I hear she makes good oatmeal." I looked out at the horizon. The sun had dipped below the water, but the stars were coming out. It was going to be a beautiful morning. And for the first time in a long time, I couldn't wait for the sun to rise. The story of Langston and Nia teaches us a profound lesson about the difference between enabling and empowering. True parental love is not about shielding our children from every storm, but teaching them how to sail the ship. By removing the safety net, Langston didn't abandon his daughter. He gave her the space to find her own strength. We learn that dignity cannot be inherited or bought. It must be earned through honest labor and accountability. Ultimately, the most valuable currency in any relationship is respect, and sometimes one must lose everything material to discover the priceless value of self-worth. If you believe that true dignity is earned and not bought, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption. Let me know in the comments if you would have forgiven Nia sooner.